Chapter 1902. Wang Ling had planned to enter version 4.0 in advance, and it was clear that he had already foreseen this battle for Lord Ma, so he hadn't used his King's Eye fire to temper Lord Ma's body. Hateful. Who would have thought that he would actually be used instead, and use the Dragon Clan fire to successfully temper Lord Ma's body? At that moment, Lord Ma's aura was even stronger after entering version 4.0. His whole body gave off an astonishing aura, and at the same time, 10 vortexes surged up behind him. These were grotto heaven spaces that could devour everything and had formidable destructive power. Everything that got close to the grotto heaven vortexes would collapse as if they were sucked into a black hole. Hateful. Feeling the immense pressure, she spread her dragon wings, and as they flapped, they formed dozens of fire tornadoes that rolled forward. Boom! But Lord Ma just raised his hand, and the 10 grotto heaven vortexes behind him moved in unison. Like magic balls, they spiraled forward with a kind of agile power. Before the fire tornadoes could get close to Lord Ma's body, the grotto heaven vortexes had already completely disintegrated and swallowed them up without leaving a trace. So strong. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was shocked. He admired Father Wang more and more, and thought that everything had been within his calculations. He had actually thought of using the Dragon Clan fire to temper Lord Ma's body, increasing his overall strength by several times over. Hateful. Hateful's attack had been completely ineffective. These 10 grotto heaven vortexes were like an airtight barrier that firmly protected Lord Ma. With a wave of his hand, the flaming lake under his feet also began to be absorbed by the 10 grotto heaven vortexes, creating a magnificent scene like a dragon sucking in water. In just one short moment, Lord Ma had already sucked the flaming lake dry. However, the scorched ground had already been reduced to scorched earth, and not a single blade of grass grew within a radius of 100 li. Lord Ma had thought of teaching Hateful a lesson. He had wanted to teach Hateful a lesson and beat her back. But now, he didn't think so. Since it was Hateful. Since this was a mistake made by Hateful, he had to at the very least capture this girl alive and suppress her here so that she could plant trees and restore the ecology of this area. Buzz! In an instant, his body glowed with golden light, and the 10 grotto heavens moved together to form a cage. Hateful was suppressed. The moment he was surrounded by the 10 grotto heavens, he felt like he was going to explode. Her eyes widened in fear. She took out the dragon descendant weapon, the burning heaven chain hammer, which was a radiant grade dragon descendant weapon, but in the end, it could not stop the grotto heaven from advancing. After taking out the chain hammer, the entire artifact was engulfed by the heavenly passage. She could not believe that she would actually be defeated by a monster. Everything happened too suddenly. The instant the 10 grotto heavens merged, Yen Di, and Yen Di disappeared. His body was engulfed and disappeared into the void. Uncle Ma didn't kill her, did he? Little Sheep asked. No. Lord Ma shook his head. I still want her to help us clean up the courtyard and rectify the ecology nearby. Everything was burned by her. She should pay for it. As he said that, Lord Ma opened his palm, and a fiery red dragon scale lay quietly in his palm. Was he disguising himself with the dragon scale? It was plucked during the duel. Then, he snapped his fingers and sent the dragon scale to the distant shore. The person who received the dragon scale was none other than Ping Shiren. At the moment, Ping Shiren's real body was playing chess with the grave god. Facing the dragon scale that had suddenly appeared on the chessboard mountain, Ping Shiren's expression changed. In the past few days, in order to escape from the imprisonment of the Tao ancestor Wang's Dharmalaksana, he had thought of countless ways. In the end, he had used the cicada shedding carapace technique to escape from Yen Di's side. He had also sought the protection of the grave god and Bai Jia. Moreover, it was Bai Jia who had thought of this method to escape from the very beginning. Ping Shiren knew that he was not strong enough to be a match for Yen Di, so he decided to join Bai Jia's side. He left his body and half of his soul behind. With Baijia's help, he guided the other half of his soul into this brand new body. This was a new body that Baijia had specially created for him. It was a body of a dragon descendant created from the dragon bone gene of the dark devouring dragon, which was now under Ping Shiren's control. Ping Shiren had thought that his cicada shedding carapace technique was flawless. Once he fully adapted to the body of one of the three great leaders of the dragon clan, he would be able to find Yan Di again, and even Wang Ling to directly carry out his revenge. But now, faced with Yan Di's dragon scale, which had suddenly teleported in front of him, he was suddenly stupefied. Why do you want to give me Yan Di's dragon scale? Ping Shiren furrowed his brows. He had also been the one to propose the plan to lure Wang Ling and the others into the eternal past. He had thought that Wang Ling wouldn't find out about everything he had done in the dark. But now, Lord Ma's long-distance teleportation instantly made Ping Shiren's heartstrings taut. Don't be too nervous. I thought this was just a test. Your appearance and aura have all changed. Now, you are a new generation dragon descendant with the dark devouring dragon gene. Plus, you have the power of the Great Old Ones, which is the perfect combination of Great Old Ones and dragons. As long as we cultivate you, you will be one of the strongest war machines in our camp. The grave god mused. Pinching the dragon's scale between two fingers, he frowned slightly. Loathing. His defeat was within his expectations. There's no need to worry too much. The Wang family isn't ordinary to begin with. Even I can't deal with them. How can she do it on her own? So, you did it on purpose? Asked Ping Shiren. Jingze and Loathing. There is some kind of bond between them. If Loathing is arrested. On the contrary, Jingze will be more determined to stand on our side. The grave god said, he was already wavering. After this disaster, Mr. Bai and I are sure that he will give up all his fantasies and become one of us. Hearing this, Ping Shiren instantly understood. But there was still one thing he couldn't figure out. What on earth is going on with Wang Miu? Bringing Wang Miu back is indeed part of our plan, and nothing has changed. It's just that Mr. Bai didn't expect the newborn Wang Wan to be so strong. The grave god laughed. He was now in the human form of Sothith. His body was covered in bubbles, and he looked like a bunch of shiny purple grapes. When he laughed, the bubbles on his body would float up, explode, and reform. Yes, that girl is like a god of war. I feel that we won't be able to snatch her away normally. But her brother is even more terrifying. It wasn't easy for us to trap him in the Eons. I know, said the grave god. This is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but it's unrealistic to force it now. Why don't we plant some seeds for the little dragon man while he's not here? Let him find us himself. Chapter 1903. Yan Luo had been captured, and Jing Se had also been severely injured. He spat out dragon blood like a drowning dog on his last breath, and completely lost the dignity of a dragon descendant. Ling Ming melted his back and took a lot of dragon spine blood from his back. This caused Jing Se to feel incomparable pain, and he kept screaming in pain. There was no doubt that Jing Se had been completely defeated, and it all looked like a foregone conclusion. Wang Miu. Only you know what your surname is. His mouth was very stubborn, and he completely ignored Ling Ming's torture as he spoke in a weak voice. Those eyes looked at Wang Miu, and for a brief moment, Wang Miu felt an indelible impact on his soul. Look at how these human cultivators treat our dragon clan. You shouldn't help the wicked do evil and acknowledge a traitor as your father, you talk too much. Ling Ming raised his hand and punched Jing Se in the back. The ground immediately caved in, creating a huge pit. Dust flew up in all directions, and the huge impact directly shook the core world to the point where it seemed like it was going to collapse. The stability of the core world structure was closely related to its owner's condition. If the owner's body and mind collapsed, the core world would also disintegrate. It was hard to imagine that Wang Yuan and Ling Ming, master and servant, had joined forces to directly wreak havoc in someone else's core world, as if they were the masters of the core world. In the next second, the scene of the world falling apart changed. Wang Miyu noticed that they had already evacuated from Jing Zhe's core world. The surroundings returned to normal, and Jing Zhe had also disappeared along with the core world. Did he run away? Ling Ming had actually been on guard against Jing Zhe escaping, so he had been keeping an eye on him. He hadn't expected the other party to escape so smoothly. It was clear that Bai Jie and the Grave God had helped him in this. After their previous failures, both of them were undoubtedly victims who had been mercilessly whipped. Since they were victims, they had to have done some research on how to escape when they couldn't win. Ling Ming was a little vexed because he couldn't tell what the other party had done. Little girl Nguan, on the other hand, had a calm expression on her face. She lay on Ling Ming's back and stretched out her soft hand to stroke Ling Ming's furry green hair. At the same time, she pinched his cute elf ears to comfort him. In their original plan, they hadn't planned to directly kill Jingze, and Wang Ling had arranged this scenario from the very beginning. As his younger sister, Wang Yuan didn't know what he was planning, but she would definitely fully support her brother's work. After obediently accepting Wang Yuan's consolation, Ling Ming calmed down a lot. Then, he carried Wang Yuan on his back and walked to Wang Miyu. "Oh, your body should be fine now, right?" "I'm fine. Auntie Nguan is too strong. She fed me a lot of pills." To be honest, even now, Wang Miyu felt the blood in his body churning. Not only was his injury about to recover, he even felt that he was stronger than before and was on the verge of a breakthrough. Ling Ming had obviously sensed this as well. He hurriedly asked, "We need to find a good place to break through. Do you want to go to the Mountain of Origins? You need to find a good place to break through. Do you want to go to the Backtrack Mountain? It's a place similar to a time-secret realm that Sword Master Ling set up. You can cultivate faster there, and it's isolated from the world." Wang Miyu thought for a while, then patted the dust off his body and stood up. "Then I'll have to trouble you, Brother Ling Ming." He had no reason to refuse such an invitation, and it was obvious that this was Wang Ling's idea. Wang Miyu felt that as a son, he had no reason not to listen to his old father. At the same time, elsewhere, in front of the Ping family's main residence, East Great Emperor, who had his eyes closed, suddenly opened them. In a foreign land, he watched the ages. This was Wang Ling's method. Even if he was trapped in a different timeline at the moment, he could still clearly understand what he was concerned about. In the Wang family's villa, Wang Miyu's situation had stabilized. It could be said that the current overall arrangement and the overall direction of the script were all within Wang Ling's expectations. And Wang Ling had planned all of this a long time ago. It was just that the interlude of being trapped for eternity had forced Wang Ling to make some slight changes to his original plan. Fortunately, everything that had happened so far had gone according to plan and had gone very smoothly. He just had to wait for Lotus Sun to see the young lady of the Ping family in front of him with peace of mind. Lotus Sun, dressed as a man, had already passed the Dao discussion and the talent show. Her beautiful swordsmanship had mesmerized everyone present for eternity. It was a swordsmanship that had never been seen before in eternity, and it was an eye-opener for everyone. Lotus Sun didn't even need to think of the moves herself. In her state of being one with the sword, Mysterious Sea led Lotus Sun through this gorgeous sword dance performance, as if he was leading her through a spirit sword waltz that no one else could see. Even the steward of the Ping family's main residence, who had always been domineering, was shocked. This kind of figure and this kind of swordsmanship were definitely not something an ordinary tycoon could pull off. Coupled with the fact that she had used a Dao ancestor pill earlier, as well as the fact that he hadn't been able to find out Lotus Sun's background no matter what he did, he became even more curious about her identity. It seems that this Mr. Wang Rongsha is indeed not an ordinary person. It looks like there's going to be a show for today's matchmaking session. He will be the first person to see the young lady. The steward guessed. After all, he was the one who had received the gift, and he was now starting to speak up for Lotus Sunday. It was just that the final outcome was still very hard to predict. After all, it was the young lady of the Ping family who had set up this matchmaking session in the first place. Their young lady had an eccentric temperament, and even if she passed all the checkpoints, it was still possible that she would be eliminated in the end. Congratulations to Mr. Wang Rongsha for passing the second round. The next round is the martial arts competition. In this round, the young lady will personally test Mr. Wang. After the results of the second round were tabulated, the steward announced it on behalf of Lotus Sunday. Everyone at the scene and the onlookers on the street applauded. They were onlookers to join in on the fun, and thought that Lotus Sun's move would provide an excellent template for them to interview for a son-in-law in the future. In the side courtyard of the Ping family's main residence, Wang Ling and the others had the opportunity to observe the scene up close. When the headquarters of the Ping clan finished reporting the plan for the next level, a beautiful woman in a pinkish-white robe slowly walked out of the hall. She looked like an immortal. She was graceful and graceful. Her appearance was vaguely familiar, but it was not exactly the same. He could only sense that feeling from her brows and eyes. At first glance, Wang Ling could confirm that this person was undoubtedly Ping Shiren's younger sister, Ping Basin. Moreover, he felt as if he had seen it somewhere before. It had nothing to do with Ping Shiren, but in the real world, he felt as if he had seen it somewhere before. Chapter 1904. For some reason, Wang Ling felt that he had seen Ping Basin somewhere before. She had a particularly heroic and elegant air about her, and didn't give off the feeling of a gentle, refined, pretty daughter of a humble family like other girls. She looked like a very pleasant person. Her long white robe accentuated her figure perfectly, and she didn't wear any gaudy silk ribbons. She gave off a very different vibe from those female cultivators from ancient times, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was a peerless beauty. The moment Lotus Sun saw Ping Basin, she was a little stunned. She had never expected the legendary eldest miss of the Ping family to be like this. She didn't seem like a girl at all, and just like Wang Ling's intuition, she felt like she had seen this Miss Ping somewhere before. Young Master Wang. At that moment, Ping Basin's words interrupted Lotus Sun's thoughts. It was a very magnetic and very neutral voice. If you closed your eyes, you wouldn't be able to tell whether it was a man or a woman. Lotus Sun quickly came back to her senses. How would Miss Peng like to compete? As she asked this, she mentally prepared herself. Their purpose in coming here wasn't to propose marriage, the main point was to meet Ping Basin's older brother, Ping Shiren, and then carry out the follow-up plan. It was just that after this simple greeting, Lotus Sun suddenly had a bad feeling, and felt that this Ping Basin in front of her wasn't as simple as she seemed. Young Master Wang's swordsmanship is superb. I've also seen your sword dance just now. It's a unique swordsmanship. I've studied thousands of swordsmanship, but this is the first time I've seen young Master Wang's swordsmanship. She smiled, looking very modest. In terms of sword technique, I definitely can't compare to young Master Wang. Young Master Wang is very strong, and I think I'll be at a disadvantage if we compete. However, I mainly focus on cultivating spiritual swords, so before the competition, I have a presumptuous request. Miss Peng, please speak. Lotus Sun bowed politely. It's like this, I definitely can't beat young Master Wang. So I thought I'd pick one of young Master Wang's followers to fight on his behalf. If that person beats me, it'll be considered young Master Wang's victory. Pick one person. Lotus Sun was stunned. Never in her wildest dreams had she expected this result. Turning around, she saw that the people behind her were no longer people, but grenades, missiles, and even nuclear bombs. Yes, no matter how useless the people behind her were, they were still a grenade. Drawing a grenade definitely wouldn't do. Lotus Sun felt that Miss Peng's strength was extraordinary, and the grenade would most likely lose. Thus, the best outcome was to draw a missile. For example, Wang Zhen, who was playing the role of the Holy Stone Cult's Holy Maiden, or Zhang Zipei, who was playing Yuren. Winning when their strength was similar was the most logical. As for the rest, Lotus Sun felt that all of them were undoubtedly nuclear bombs. Behind him were the 4 emperors of Primordial Era. No matter which one Peng Basin picked, it would be considered as winning the lottery. If they were to fight, she would have to act. Furthermore, she had to act as if she had won by a hair's breadth, and she couldn't win too obviously. What's wrong? Why is young Master Wang so hesitant? Are you not confident in the people you brought? At that moment, Peng Basin continued to provoke him with words. This is also a test. Generally speaking, the strength of the accompanying servants is a reflection of their background. I will naturally comply with Miss Peng's suggestion. At this point, Lotus Sun had no choice but to play along. She silently looked back at Wang Ling, hoping that he would step back a little and not stand too close to the front. After all, what she was most worried about was that Wang Ling would be chosen. Because even nuclear bombs had different grades, in theory, Wang Ling couldn't even be considered a nuclear bomb. It was basically the legendary dark matter. It was too unstable. If he made a move, he might directly raise the entire planet to the ground. On the other side, Wang Ling immediately understood what Lotus Sun meant. After all, he and Lotus Sun had gone through several missions together, and they still had this bit of tacit understanding in their eyes. But he had only taken half a step back when Peng Basin called out his name. Sir! Don't step back, it's you. Wang Ling. As soon as he said this, Lotus Sun and everyone else instantly broke out in a sweat. Although everyone already knew that the plot of the Eternal World was basically crooked and director Wang Ling had to manually correct it, no one had expected that director Wang, who had been standing behind the scenes, would actually take the field himself. Are you sure, Miss Peng? Lotus Sun confirmed. She hoped that Peng Basin would suddenly change her mind and choose someone else, but in the end, this Miss Peng shook her head with a smile on her face and said, I usually like to play chess, and it's said that there are no regrets when you play. Of course there are no regrets when you choose someone. It's this brother. I saw him step back, and it looks like he doesn't have much confidence in himself, so I chose him. At this point, Lotus Sun had completely figured it out. Peng Basin actually had no intention of marrying him, which was why she had chosen him. But since she had no intention of marrying him, why did she make such a big fuss about inviting all sorts of son-in-law to come knocking on her door? Was she waiting for the one she loved to appear? She didn't understand. But since Peng Basin had chosen Wang Ling of her own accord, Lotus Sun could only silently wish Peng Basin good luck in her heart. In any case, it was just a competition. It was fine as long as Wang Ling didn't marry this woman, this was what she thought in her heart, and she very cooperatively stepped aside. On the other side, Wang Ling also quietly and obediently stepped forward. Since the arrow was already knocked on the bowstring, he had no choice but to release it. Wang Ling wasn't flustered at all. After all, he was only possessing this body, and East Great Emperor was still in charge of the control of his body. East Great Emperor himself could freely control his strength, and there was no situation where he couldn't suppress his battle strength. But as an emperor, even East Great Emperor himself wasn't very confident. He stayed in the imperial palace all year round to deal with all kinds of important matters, and the people around him were all first-class experts. Although this Miss Peng looked very extraordinary, in the end, she was just a young miss of an aristocratic family. He didn't know anything about her specific strength, and didn't know where to start. Senior Wang, if the situation doesn't look good, you have to pull me back. Seeing that Wang Ling had returned control of the body to him, East Great Emperor immediately understood that this meant that he was going to make a move. Before he officially made his move, he said this in his heart. However, he received Wang Ying's ruthless reply. I'm very sorry, I only give people buffs, not attenuate them. East Great Emperor, buff, what do you mean? Wang Ying sighed. It's a buff spell. East Great Emperor, very well, then Senior shouldn't act rashly. I'll see how it goes. Helpless, East Great Emperor sighed, and then directly took out a spirit sword from his emperor's treasure chest. This was already the worst of all the spirit swords he could take out. However, when the Great East Emperor took it out, everyone at the scene revealed a shocked expression. Royal King Sword. Isn't this the legendary spirit sword? Chapter 1905. It's actually the Royal King Sword. Ping Shiren sat on a wide bench in a dark underground room deep within the Ping family's headquarters, sipping tea as he looked at the scene projected by the magic ball. He was able to see the entire scene of Ping Basin marrying Ping Basin. Logically speaking, as her elder brother, he should have helped his younger sister choose her husband. However, Ping Shiren felt that there was no need for that at the moment. His younger sister was merely a tool that could be used at a crucial moment to verify the path of cultivation he had chosen. Furthermore, she was a consumable that could be discarded at any time after being used. This had always been Ping Shiren's opinion since he was young. Furthermore, he despised those who protected his younger sister like she was the apple of their eyes. At this moment, he stared at the image projected by the magic ball in front of him, and his boredom finally piqued his interest. Is there still no result? A black-robed attendant stood at the side. His voice had aged, and his strength was extraordinary. He was no weaker than the Emperor's guards. Master, we've already done our best to investigate, but we still haven't found Wang Rongxia's true identity. Then I understand. Ping Shiren nodded. He seemed to have understood something. How interesting. They came to propose marriage, and even got a fake identity. It seems that their goal isn't simple. They're probably not just here to marry Basin. Master suspects that their identities are fake. The black-robed guard was clearly surprised by this deduction. There doesn't seem to be any other reasonable explanation, Ping Shiren smiled. Our Ping family's influence is spread across the 4 regions. We have spies in all the regions governed by the 4 emperors. If Wang Rongxia was a famous member of the royal family, there's no way our Ping family wouldn't have noticed her. Of course, this is only my personal guess. It's only after she took out the Royal King's sword that I confirmed my suspicions. The black-robed guard bowed and asked, if this servant may be so bold as to ask, what's wrong with the Royal King's sword? The Royal King's sword is a legendary sword with a very special origin. In theory, only the 4 emperors possess it. But now, it's actually in the hands of a servant. Don't you find it strange? Look at this servant. Although his clothing is standard, it should have been specially packaged. He doesn't look anything like a servant. Ping Shiren analyzed the situation as he sipped on his tea. I've heard that the 4 martial monarchs are wary of the Ping clan's development. He sent people to test the waters several times. The 4 emperors gathering this time is actually a very good opportunity for them to communicate. At the same time, this is something that my Ping family is especially concerned about. However, if they have a secret meeting before the 4 emperors gathering, we won't know. Secret meeting. The black-robed guard revealed a look of astonishment. He could not believe this at all. This shouldn't be, right? It should be known that not long ago, the West Great Emperor and the East Great Emperor had just fought a fierce battle. Because of this, the affiliated royal families, large, medium and small clans, as well as the rogue cultivators of the 2 regions had a huge conflict. But now, Ping Shiren suddenly made such a bold assumption. He believed that Wang Rongxiao's true identity was a perfect fake identity carefully crafted by the four emperors after a secret meeting. Such a guess was indeed bold. However, after the black-robed guard pondered over this speculation, he felt that it was not entirely impossible. However, it was difficult to explain why the two great emperors, who were eager to fight the moment they saw each other, would suddenly shake hands and start to target the Ping clan together. Then, Master, should we chase them out? There's no need for that. Ping Shiren shook his head. They're already here, and they even dared to use a fake identity. Although I don't know how many great emperors were involved in crafting this fake identity, I think it's very interesting. Moreover, this servant chosen by Bateson seems to be the personal guard of a great emperor. He's quite powerful. I know that Bateson doesn't want to marry, so she must win this competition. If she's not confident of winning, she'll have to use the thing that I gave her. Then, Ping Shiren's lips curled up. His sinister expression revealed a malicious smile. On the other side, the inner courtyard of the Ping family's huge headquarters had already been set up. This was originally a place for the Ping family to cultivate, and it was very spacious. Wang Ling looked around and saw that it was actually as big as 20 football fields, and all kinds of terrain had been created inside. Deserts, lakes, forests, cliffs, in order to satisfy the Ping family's cultivation needs for different spirit roots, everything had been set up here. The Ping family's wealth was indeed astonishing for a single training field to be this big. Furthermore, this was just one of the cultivation fields in the Ping family's headquarters. The total area of the Ping family's headquarters was indeed unimaginable. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a replica of an imperial palace. In some sense, Wang Ling felt that it was even more imposing than the imperial palaces of the four emperors. Ping Basin was already ready for battle. She stood on top of a stone pillar on a very high rockery, dressed in a white robe and holding the smelt bone sword in her hand. Her bai bone was also not an ordinary object. It was an object created by a famous refiner in the ancient times. It had a strong ductility and was a spirit sword that could be extended and contracted. When it was used, it could be like a python that could swallow mountains and rivers and sweep away thousands of soldiers, or it could be like a spirit snake that could twist and turn and be flexible. It was a spirit sword with a very strong comprehensive performance. But everyone knew that all powerful spirit swords came from the Sword King world, which was still in its infancy in ancient times. At that time, the sword spirit of the smelt bone sword already had a ranking in the Sword King world. In some sense, it could be considered one of the ancestors of swords. It was just that as the Sword King world's spirit swords became more and more diverse, the smelt bone sword gradually declined. Based on the current ranking of swords, the smelt bone sword couldn't even enter the top 1,000. That was to say, in a normal match, Lotus Sun's Mysterious Sea could indeed beat Ping Basin and her smelt bone. But if it was the ancient spirit sword that was on the same timeline against the smelt bone, in this period, the smelt bone was still a very powerful ancestor of swords. Are you ready, Mr. Servant? Ping Basin smiled lightly. The next second, she moved. Staring at the body of the East Great Emperor, she directly slashed at him from a strange angle. This kind of power was even more terrifying than that of a python. It was the power of a flood dragon. As it swept over, it stirred up mist and ice crystals all over the sky. As it swept over, everything in its path froze inch by inch. Did she cultivate in both ice and water magic? The East Great Emperor didn't even frown. He didn't even have the intention of summoning the sword spirit. He swung his sword at the trajectory of the smelt bone. There was a buzzing sound. Under the blade of the sword, the East Great Emperor's power alone burst into a dazzling ray of sunlight. In this brief moment, Ping Shiren suddenly stood up from his chair. He didn't know whether it was an illusion or not. Although it was only for a very short moment. He felt as if he had seen a Mahamayuri flying in the air, emitting endless light and heat. Chapter 1906. The faintly discernible Mahamayuri's Dharma form only appeared for a brief moment. Under the blazing sunlight, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Peng Basin couldn't see the image of the Dharma form, but Peng Shiren, who was watching from the shadows, could see it clearly. His realm was higher than Peng Basin's, and he had been observing the battlefield in secret. When East Great Emperor had used this sword technique called 10,000 Li Red, his eyes had instantly widened, and his extremely intelligent mind had also come to a standstill at that moment. Peng Shiren actually had some doubts in his heart. He didn't know if he had seen wrong. Wisdom King Dharma form. This was a supreme Dharma virtual body that East Great Emperor had only recently used, and no one else should be able to use it. Could this person be East Great Emperor himself? It couldn't be. Peng Shiren couldn't believe that an emperor-level figure would willingly serve as a servant in order to put on a good show. How was this possible? Peng Shiren's mind was filled with countless thoughts for a moment. After all, this was just his wishful thinking. If the other party really was East Great Emperor himself, he shouldn't have deliberately made such a mistake for Wang Ling to see. So after careful consideration, Wang Ling felt that he was wrong. This person definitely wasn't East Great Emperor. If he was, there was no way he would make such a low-level mistake. As for how to explain the sudden appearance of the Wisdom King Dharma form, Wang Ling thought that this servant had to be East Great Emperor's personal guard, so it wouldn't be strange for him to have learned a few moves under his influence. Furthermore, from the fact that the Dharma form had disappeared in the blink of an eye, it could also be seen that summoning the Wisdom King Dharma form just now had just been a fluke. A supreme Dharma form like this consumed a lot of spirit power. Staying in the air for one more second would consume an ocean of spirit energy, which ordinary people wouldn't be able to withstand. Even if they had learned this move, they would only be able to make a slight appearance like this. This was an intense clash of thoughts from Peng Shiren's inner world. What Peng Shiren didn't know was that this Wisdom King Dharma form just now was in fact a flaw that East Great Emperor had deliberately revealed. At the same time, this was also a secret instruction from Wang Ling. He predicted that Peng Shiren must be observing the battle nearby, so he deliberately let the Great East Emperor reveal a flaw. With Peng Shiren's self-proclaimed intelligence and suspicious nature, he would definitely think of the problem from an angle that deviated from the truth. If he had concealed himself well from the beginning to the end and won against Peng Basin flawlessly, it would be easier for problems to arise. On the other side of the training ground, Peng Basin frowned slightly. This was because this servant was much stronger than she had imagined. With just a single sword technique, he was able to neutralize her preemptive attack. If she did not treat this person seriously and go all out, she was afraid that she would not be able to send this person away. She raised her spiritual power in an attempt to launch a new attack. In the next moment, the East Great Emperor felt the ground beneath his feet begin to shake, causing an earthquake. The tide of snakes coming from all directions attracted the attention of everyone present. They were small elemental snakes summoned by various elemental energies. Under the command of the sword spirit of the Wood's Bone Sword, they were moving forward at an astonishing speed. Carrying their own elemental energies, they surged forward and charged forward. The momentum of their charge was enough to make people shudder. This was also a scene that made the fearful onlookers collapse. These biting cold little snakes were too frightening. They gathered forward at an astonishing speed with a terrible fierceness. With the advantage of their flexible bodies, they advanced forward, ignoring the terrain and surging forward from all directions. In an instant, the first batch of snakes had already arrived beneath the East Great Emperor's feet. It had to be said that Peng Basin's ability to trigger a beast tide was indeed amazing. This was an elemental transformation technique. She used the ability of the spirit sword to transform the water and ice spirit roots that she cultivated, thus attempting to restrain all elements. These elemental snakes surging from all directions each had the ability to devour the corresponding elemental spirit energy. In other words, no matter what method the East Great Emperor used next, it would be neutralized. Unfortunately, Ping Basin had missed one point, and that was that the person she was fighting now was the emperor of a territory. Perhaps this trick would have a miraculous effect on others, but as a great emperor, the East Great Emperor had seen all kinds of situations. Playing this kind of trick in front of the Great Emperor was like waving a broadsword in front of Guan Yu. Under normal circumstances, the East Great Emperor would immediately use the vermilion bird fire shield to firmly wrap himself in all directions like an eggshell. But now that he was facing a situation where the elements were devoured, he could not use this trick so easily. Of course, he could also directly release the Supreme Peacock Wisdom King Dharma form to protect himself. It was a sacred flame that was above the 5 elements of fire, and ordinary elemental devouring spells could not resist it at all. But the East Great Emperor thought that he was playing the role of a servant now. Since he was a servant, he naturally had to act like a servant. Therefore, just as the East Great Emperor was about to be surrounded by the snake tide, he moved again and waved the royal sword in his hand. At first, the speed of the sword dance was very slow, but gradually, the sword in his hand sped up and formed a shadow. Without any spells or the power of the spirit sword itself, the sword chi that was formed when he waved the sword quickly formed a barrier made of ordinary sword chi under the high speed of the flying sword. This speed was really too fast. Ping Basin was surprised. She used her naked eyes to capture it, but she could not follow the rhythm at all. She was horrified as she stared at the elemental snakes that had entangled the East Great Emperor being beheaded. At this moment, the East Great Emperor stood in the middle of the battlefield like a high-speed yet ordinary meat grinder. He controlled the stalemate of the beast tide with his own sword chi alone. What was the background of this servant? On the other side of the secret room, Ping Shiren's expression was cold, and he no longer had the indifference he had at the beginning. His eyes flickered. Ever since the moment the faintly discernible Wisdom King Dharma form appeared, he had not spoken for a long time. The secret room was filled with a cold air. Master, Miss seems to be in a stalemate. The background of this servant is definitely not simple, the black-robed guard said. Trash. Ping Shiren snorted. He was a little angry. He did not know what Ping Basin was doing. In this situation, it was obvious that she was no match for this servant, but even now, she had not thought of using the item he had given her. That was a Supreme Saint Dharma treasure. As long as she used it at the crucial moment, she would definitely win. But the prerequisite was that there would be a certain degree of sequelae. Moreover, even Ping Shiren himself did not know what the sequelae were. He had given the Dharma treasure to Ping Basin in the hope of using his sister's body to experiment. In the end, Ping Basin's hesitant attitude really made him, as her elder brother, extremely angry. Chapter 1907. Ping Basin's reluctance to use the magic treasure he gave him made Ping Shiren's head hurt. It was a golden round pill, which was what Ping Shiren introduced to Ping Basin when he gave it to him. In fact, Ping Shiren knew very well that this was not a pill at all, but an insect sac obtained from the outer god's palace in the old world. He had been communicating with the power of the old world in an attempt to control the eternal cultivation world through the old world, but at the same time, Ping Shiren had always been a cautious person. Therefore, he thought of many ways to experiment with this power. Ping Shiren remembered that he had conducted a total of 2 experiments with the insect sac. The first time, he threw the insect sac into a glass of clean water. As a result, the powerful energy of the insect sac directly turned the glass of clean water into a glass of high-concentration cosmic liquid. He didn't dare to drink it directly, but poured the liquid on a dying spirit plant. As a result, not only did the spirit plant quickly revive and turn into a terrifying vine, but it also obtained terrifying energy. Not only that, this low-level vine actually had intelligence and called itself Dido. Ping Shiren had never seen such a situation, so he made a prompt decision to cut off Ito before it was fully developed. The second time, he experimented on a long-legged worm named Zhou Ben. As a result, this long-legged worm obtained a huge energy gain, and it also completed evolution on the original basis, becoming a terrifying creature between the cultivation world and the old world. However, it was a pity that this legworm obviously hadn't adapted to the huge energy brought by the insect's sac. Before Ping Shiren could even make a move, Xiao Ben tripped on its own long legs. At that moment, the huge energy in its body fell heavily to the ground. The huge impact directly detonated this energy, and in the end, not even ashes were left. At that time, Ping Shiren sighed. If this Xiao Ben could survive successfully, with this terrifying growth ability, it would not be strange for it to be called a genius in the world of legworms. However, Ping Shiren had never experimented on humans. From the results of the first 2 experiments, he determined that the insect's sac indeed had the powerful ability to become stronger and even evolve living beings. However, the energy brought by the insect's sac was not something ordinary people could withstand. He had already experimented with 2 insect sacs, and now there were only 2 left. In other words, if he were to consume the insect's sac, he would have another opportunity to experiment. In terms of bloodline and combat power, Ping Shiren believed that Ping Basin was the most suitable candidate. If Ping Basin had any side effects after swallowing the insect sac, it should be the most similar to his and also the most obvious. In this case, after he swallowed the insect sac himself, he could prepare in advance and be on guard. The scene returned to the scene of the battle. After several consecutive defeats, Ping Basin's confidence had clearly fallen to a low point. She never thought that a servant would be so difficult to deal with. Ping Basin didn't want to get married at all. The reason why she held this large-scale marriage ceremony was so that the man she liked would have some awareness. Even though Ping Basin was clearly aware that with the awkward blood bond between them, becoming Dao companions was bound to be nonsense, as a young woman, she still wished to see the man she liked get jealous because of her. However, it was a pity that the man still chose to observe the battle in the dark even though they were already at the door. Ping Basin knew that the person had given her a golden pill. If she swallowed it, she would have a high chance of winning. However, Ping Basin didn't want to do that now. She was looking forward to getting injured, and even more looking forward to seeing Ping Shiren come forward to save her after she was injured. However, from the looks of it now, all of this seemed to be wishful thinking on her part. Ping Basin had once fantasized that Ping Shiren would have a good impression of her. She was even willing to go through the cruelest blood refinement array for Ping Shiren and change her bloodline completely. She wanted to have nothing to do with the Ping family at all. However, Ping Basin now realized that she had made a wrong choice. You don't have to think about your master and go easy on me. After fighting for so long, I'm just wasting my spiritual power for no reason. To me, this kind of battle is completely boring. Moreover, this is also disrespecting me. After the last sword strike, Ping Basin and East Emperor quickly distanced themselves. She stood at the mouth of the frozen waterfall in the distance, releasing an extremely cold aura from her body. Ping Basin wasn't stupid. She knew that Ping Shiren definitely had a purpose for giving her that victory elixir. She didn't know the origin of this elixir, but believed that the man she liked wouldn't use it to harm her. Ping Shiren still hadn't made a move, and she wasn't East Emperor's match at all. Ping Basin didn't want to get married like this, so in her despair, she took out the golden insect sac. Is it finally going to start? Ping Shiren was overjoyed when he saw this scene. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. When Ping Basin put the insect sac in her mouth, it was obvious that all the veins in her body had popped up, and traces of blood flow could be clearly seen through her fair, jade-like skin. This was the power of the old world, which Wang Ling instantly sensed. Before this, he could clearly sense that Ping Basin was hesitating about whether or not to swallow this bug sac. Moreover, it was clear that she had been kept in the dark and had no idea what this bug sac was at all. But now, she had already swallowed this bug sac into her stomach. In an instant, her fair skin was covered in a dense cobweb of veins that had popped up. In an extremely short period of time, even her body turned jet black. She screamed in pain, and her jet black hair grew like the fur of a ferocious beast. Her aura and battle strength kept increasing under the effect of the insect's sac. This time, East Emperor was completely stupefied. When he had fought Goddess Jiao Yang earlier, even if she had swallowed an elixir given by West Emperor, her strength hadn't increased at such a terrifying rate. Now, Ping Basin had only swallowed an elixir, and her battle strength had increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just over 10 seconds, she had reached the level of a heavenly ancestor. At that moment, Wang Ying finally couldn't help saying directly, "Someone else has changed." The current situation was obviously not something that the great East Emperor could deal with. Thus, Wang Ying spoke directly. On the other side, Wang Ling, who had been silent all this time, was already ready to go. His sister should be used to feel sorry for him. In his opinion, a person like Ping Shiren who deserved to die, should be sent straight to hell. Chapter 1908. Something was wrong. Ping Basin's condition was very bad. Her body had become slender under the surging energy in her body, and the protruding veins were clearly imprinted on the surface of her skin. She was clearly such a beautiful girl, but under the stimulation of the power of the great old world, even her appearance had changed dramatically. Her white Taoist robe had been completely torn apart, and her lower limbs had turned into a string of indescribable slender purple tentacles that rolled outwards. From afar, it looked like a skirt in the dark night, exuding a terrifying aura. How could this be? This was a scene that no one had expected except for Ping Shiren. The power of the great old world was too terrifying. It had directly modified the genes of Ping Basin, a human cultivator, and turned her into a witch of the great old days in the dark night. This allowed her to have the power of the outer god in her body, and it was erupting uncontrollably. The color of the sky had changed, and the dusk sky was covered with a layer of scarlet red that was full of slaughter and terror. It was so strange that it made people feel a strong spiritual pressure. Great! So beautiful! Basin! My good sister! Ping Shiren was overjoyed. Such a huge blessing made him feel extremely excited, and he looked at Ping Basin, who had already become a monster, with admiration in his eyes. To be honest, he had never thought that Ping Basin was very beautiful, but now Ping Shiren felt that she was already a perfect human work of art. Protect Master. Seeing this, everyone in the battle sect had a tacit understanding. Monk Jin Deng, who was playing the role of Great Southern Emperor, took the initiative to pull her back, and everyone worked together to form a formation. On the surface, it looked like they were protecting her, but in reality, they were secretly constructing a solid barrier that firmly enveloped the entire Ping family mansion. This was an extremely powerful spiritual energy barrier that gathered the spiritual energy of everyone in the battle sect, and it was airtight. Although they didn't know if it would be able to deal with the energy attack of the mutated Ping Basin, this kind of protection was still necessary. At the very least, it could buy time for the surrounding wandering cultivators to escape. This was because outside the battlefield, many experienced wandering cultivators had already realized the danger of the Ping family mansion seeping out. Something's wrong. Why did the energy in the Ping family mansion suddenly increase so much? It's just a competition, is there a need? Since ancient times, rogue cultivators' ability to predict danger was always on point. If there was danger, they would run and not face it head-on. This was a great strategy that allowed them to step onto the path of immortality. With a few rogue cultivators taking the lead, the onlookers quickly dispersed as well, not daring to stay any longer. Only the core members of the battle sect were still playing their roles and watching from the sidelines. Even the steward of the Ping family was horrified. Ping Basin's outburst was something he did not expect. What was even more unexpected was the servants brought by Mr. Wang Rongsha, who came to marry Ping Basin, if he was not mistaken, these servants had just joined hands to set up an extremely thick barrier that directly enveloped the entire Ping family's main residence. This was not something that ordinary servants could do. "You are?" the Ping family's head steward asked in astonishment. "Be quiet. Can't you see that your young miss is in danger? Our master's strongest servant is saving her," Xiang Yi, who played the role of the Great West Emperor, said. In his original world, there were also battle records of him fighting with the old Sun System beings. One win, one draw. Xiang Yi had always harbored a deep grudge against such creatures. Now that he had a chance to observe them up close, he felt that it was an excellent opportunity to learn from Wang Ling. The Ping family's head steward was instantly speechless. Indeed, the current situation was already out of his control. The moment he saw Ping Basin go berserk, he had hoped that Ping Shiren would appear. However, no one in the Ping family responded to this sudden situation. The Ping family's main residence had served the Ping family for many years, and he had almost instantly figured out the stakes involved. He knew that all this might be for Ping Shiren's benefit. But why on earth was this so? Ping Basin was clearly his younger sister, and his biological sister at that moment. At that moment, the Ping family's head steward frowned deeply as he stared at the sky, which had collapsed under the weight of darkness. The entire Ping family's main residence was now sealed off. It was as if a powerful force from the old Japanese world could dominate everything here, blocking out everything and isolating it from the rest of the world. It was clear that Ping Basin had gained tremendous power from the insect sac, but at the same time, she was also suffering endless pain. With Ping Basin at the center, the energy that was wantonly emitted stirred the air, crushed everything, and swallowed up the space nearby. This was a power of annihilation. Everything that got close to her disintegrated in an instant. Level 3 Heavenly Ancestor. In less than 3 minutes, her realm had gone from the original Tao God realm to Heavenly Ancestor in one fell swoop, and it was still climbing. Wang Ling knew that he couldn't wait any longer. He had to find a way to suppress Ping Basin. Right now, Ping Basin was like a balloon filled with air, using her human cultivator body to prop up the power of the old Japanese world. If he let this power continue to grow, the consequences would be unthinkable. Heavenly Ancestor. Basin. You're more outstanding and beautiful than ever now. Inside the secret room, Ping Shiren was secretly excited. He watched Ping Basin's transformation with fascination, and at the same time, looked forward to the moment when Ping Basin crushed this servant in front of him. No matter how extraordinary this Wang Rongxia's background was, or how extraordinary this servant was, in the end, a servant was just a servant. In the current situation where Ping Basin was infinitely powerful, it didn't matter what the background of this servant who was acting on behalf of Wang Rongxia was. So what if she was a great emperor? Even if she was a great emperor, she would still die. Bzzzt. There was a bang. Ping Basin made her move. The tentacle skirt under her feet suddenly spread out to completely cover the area in front of her. These tentacles were made of highly dense energy foam, and just moving through the air carried a terrifying power of annihilation. Wang Ling released his heart sword, and the sword intent was traceless as he tried to cut off all the tentacles. This was a sword intent constructed of mental strength, but the Ping Basin in front of him completely ignored it, and continued to attack with her original will. There was a reason for her fearlessness. Not only could her tentacle skirt affect reality, it could also destroy mental strength. Wang Ling had dealt with the outer gods of the old Japanese world before. Although it hadn't been a direct confrontation, he had fought against the god of the grave, who had also inherited the outer god's bloodline. However, he had found that the mental strength of the outer gods was generally extremely terrifying. Although he still couldn't tell what kind of outer god power Ping Basin was currently affected by, this strong sense of oppression was still familiar to him. At that moment, he looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. The heart sword attack just now had failed. But it didn't matter at all. He just needed to increase the mental strength of the heart sword. He decided to first magnify it 100 million times. Chapter 1909. The Traceless Heart Sword was a supreme secret technique of Sword Dao, and could not be used by those who had reached the great perfection of Sword Dao. As the name implied, this was a technique that softened one's mental energy into reality, and thus transformed invisible spirit power into sharp sword intent. It was an attack on the level of consciousness, but it could affect reality. In other words, if you were stabbed by the heart sword, not only would you suffer a mental attack, you would also suffer an equal amount of physical damage. In the old world, most outer gods had extraordinary mental power, and ordinary cultivators couldn't contend with them. However, Wang Ling had always been most willing to try defeating the other party in the domain they were most familiar with. Because Wang Ling didn't believe that he was truly invincible, and believed that he couldn't be a true hexagonal warrior, and that there had to be something he was weak in. In his many battles in the past, Wang Ling had already experienced countless confrontations on the physical and magical levels. Unfortunately, he hadn't lost even once. So this time, he was faced with a new challenge. Outer gods were old bosses of the Spirit series. Although Wang Ling had defeated the Grave God last time, the Grave God's inheritance of Sothatha's outer god Taoism wasn't complete. This time, Ping Basin was ambushed by Ping Shiren and swallowed the insect sac. Even though he couldn't tell what kind of outer god's orthodoxy it was, Ping Basin still couldn't figure it out. Although Wang Ling couldn't tell what outer god Taoism this Ping Basin's wantonly surged mental power, Wang Ling could already sense that Ping Basin was stronger than the Grave God back then. Although the Grave Gods inherited Sothatha's Taoism was equally powerful, the other party's strength lay in its control over time and space. In terms of mental power alone, Ping Basin's growth rate was even more astonishing than the Grave Gods. After Wang Ling's first tentative wave of the heart sword failed under the powerful mental fluctuations, a second wave of 100 million times the power of the heart sword swiftly formed around him, and directly turned into a lotus sword defense that was impenetrable. Wang Ling stared at Ping Basin, whose body continued to expand, and without the slightest hesitation, he suddenly shot out a 100 million times the power of the heart sword. In the air in front of him, profound runes from the old world lit up at the same time. These were the outer mental barriers that had blocked Wang Ling's first wave of the heart sword attack. There was a loud bang. This time, the heart sword intent that was 100 million times stronger destroyed all these ancient runes effortlessly. In an instant, they completely collapsed like dried twigs. The Ping family's main residence shook violently. With the battlefield as the center, violent fluctuations spread out in all directions, collapsing dozens of palaces. The chief steward of the Ping family was dumbfounded. The buildings of the Ping family's main residence were all made of superior materials that could even resist the impact of Dao God spells. He never thought that they would be as brittle as tofu pudding. The moment the outer god's mental barrier collapsed, Ping Basin let out a pained roar, and the gradually expanding bloodline of the great old sun in her body showed an unyielding attitude. The creatures of the great old sun had always regarded human cultivators as inferior creatures, and Wang Ling's resistance completely activated the contempt and anger flowing in the outer god's bloodline. Ping Basin's power surged again. This time, it directly reached an astonishing level 6 heavenly ancestor, and directly rose by 3 minor realms, which Wang Ling found incredible. Her body swelled even more than before, and she was no longer as slender as a twig. From a thin dark witch, she had turned into a gigantic lump of flesh that floated in the air like a mountain. Tentacles covered the bottom of the lump of flesh, and mucus with a terrifying density of energy dripped down along them. At the very top of the lump of flesh, Wang Ling could clearly see Ping Basin's face roaring in pain. Sayanigusi. East Great Emperor suddenly said at that moment. As an emperor, he had always been on guard against the revival of the power of the Great Old Sun, so he had done a lot of personal research on the ancient Great Old World. At first, he hadn't been able to tell what kind of outer god power Ping Basin had inherited. Now that he saw this outer god body that was similar to what was described in the ancient books, a name instantly slipped out of his mouth. Among the outer gods, it was a terrifying existence known as the Dark Mother Goddess, who possessed supreme mental dominance and even the ability to nurture the endless power of the Great Old Ones and the ability to restore life. Moreover, East Great Emperor was sure that Ping Basin's body wouldn't explode because she had inherited Sainagusi's outer god bloodline. This was because Ping Basin had already entered the intermediate form, and Sainagusi's bloodline had already completely contaminated her. Thanks to Sainagusi's powerful life force, Ping Basin's life would be spared. But it was clear that Ping Basin's will hadn't been completely devoured, and she was still desperately resisting this declining outer god bloodline. But in this extreme state, in order to relieve the pain in her body, she instinctively wanted to release this power in her body. And so, even more destruction and attack occurred. Just as the 100 million times heart sword broke through the outermost barrier and continued forward, Wang Ling saw the tentacles hanging down from the flesh suddenly move. They directly plunged deep into the ground, and then pierced Ping Lai's core at an extremely fast speed. It was like countless straws piercing the planet at the same time to directly squeeze out all its energy. Once the planet's energy was completely drained, the whole planet would directly disintegrate and turn into cosmic dust. It was obvious that the plants attached to Ping Lai would instantly wither and turn yellow. With the Ping family's headquarters as the center, this wither would directly spread to every corner of Ping Lai until the planet's energy was completely drained. Under this kind of energy extraction, the 100 million times heart sword in the end didn't achieve the effect Wang Ling wanted. Although his heart sword kept advancing, Ping Basin kept building barriers to weaken the sword's power, so it was impossible for the 100 million times heart sword to reach the core. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. But running into a wall twice in a row didn't change his expression in the slightest. After all, it was only 100 million times, which was far from his peak. He could see that Sainagus had already entered a defensive state. This Dark Mother God was trying to rely on squeezing out the planet's energy to reach a higher level of bloodline between herself and Ping Basin. When that time came, she would be able to use the Dark Mother God's power to continuously produce terrifying rulers of the old days. When that time came, the recovery plan for the old world would be mostly successful. But something that Sainagus hadn't expected happened very quickly. Because at that moment, the human youngster standing in front of it slowly closed his eyes. There was a deathly silence at first, and then a horrifying scene happened in the next moment. This time, the youngster's heart sword wasn't aimed at the huge flesh that blotted out the sky, but directly followed the tentacles to the ground. Boom! With just one sword strike, Ping Lai had already been pierced through. Sainagus gripped Ping Basin's body, and her entire being started to go into a trance. It couldn't believe that a human cultivator youngster could actually do this. Then, in the next second, an even more unbelievable scene happened. Wang Ling bent down and crouched over the hole that had been pierced through. His sharp arm reached in through the hole and then extended infinitely. This was the true hand of God, which directly reached into the depths of the hole. Then, it directly grabbed the tentacles that Sainagus was absorbing the energy from the planet's core. Chapter 1910. In the face of these mental barriers, Wang Ling had been thinking about the possibility of breaking through them head-on. The 100 million times heart sword had only broken through the outermost barrier, so if he wanted to directly break through to the core, he would need to increase his strength. But the problem in front of him was that he didn't know how much strength he needed to increase. If he increased it too much, Ping Basin might die in a second. Wang Ling didn't want to see that happen. His original intention was to save Ping Basin and get her out of her pain as soon as possible. If he directly destroyed her, the problem would become much simpler. Thus, in this critical moment, Wang Ling was quick-witted. He directly reached out and aimed at Ping Lai's star core, then directly plunged into the ground and grabbed outer god Cyanegis' tentacle. This roundabout attack instantly allowed Wang Ling to regain control of the battlefield. Like a cat that had been caught by its tail, he directly broke through to the front. Hum. An ear-piercing sound came from the void. It came from Cyanegis. It sounded like the angry roar of the mother goddess of darkness, but in fact, Cyanegis was chanting in her own way, using the language of the great old world. This terrifying outer god was erupting in anger. Furthermore, it could already tell that the East Great Emperor in front of it wasn't the real East Great Emperor, and knew that there was another soul in his body. So it roared in the language of the old world and lashed out at Wang Ling for his rudeness in grabbing its tentacle. It swore a dark oath to pull Wang Ling's soul out of the East Great Emperor's body. In the next second, there was a boom. A terrifying mental fluctuation was instantly transmitted through the tentacle that Wang Ling had grabbed, and like an electric current, it directly flowed up Wang Ling's fingers. If anyone below the Tao Ancestor realm came into direct contact with this mental fluctuation, they would immediately feel a numbness spread from their fingers to their whole body. This would lead to hallucinations, and in more serious cases, they would directly lose consciousness and their souls would leave their bodies, entering a state where their spirit and flesh would be separated. At that time, these terrifying outer gods from the old world would be able to nibble away at their souls. But what surprised Cyanegis was that this spiritual fluctuation didn't have the slightest effect on the youth in front of her. She was puzzled. She couldn't understand what kind of existence the young soul living in the East Great Emperor's body was. The soul of a 16 or 17-year-old and the terrifying strength of an ancient monster. Cyanegis couldn't understand how a cultivator with a human body could be so powerful. In the secret chamber, Ping Shiren also stared at the image projected by the magic treasure. He could not help but stand up from his chair. He stared at the servant, his face trembling. He had never thought that a servant could be so powerful. This person. Just who is he? Ping Shiren's mind was in a mess. He worshipped the power from the old world infinitely. In fact, he wanted to use the power of the old world to combine it with the path of cultivation that he had mastered. Through the combination of the two techniques, he could learn from each other's strengths and make up for his shortcomings. Thus, he could surpass ordinary cultivators with the body of a cultivator and become the first person in history. He would become a supreme existence. Yes, his ultimate goal was to surpass Tao Ancestor Wang. He would become a legend in the history of human cultivators. But Ping Shiren had never thought that the dream that he had been chasing for so many years would actually be beaten to it. He was clearly a human cultivator, but he was using his own strength to resist the power of the outer god from the old world. Ping Shiren could never have imagined this. At that moment, looking at the scene in front of him, he felt pain in his cheeks, as if two resounding slaps had been slapped across his face. Impossible. This is an outer god. Even if Tao Ancestor Wang were here in person, he might not be able to defeat him. Ping Shiren was a little panicked and astonished by Wang Ling's method. At that moment, he had already vaguely sensed that the young man standing here dueling with the outer god wasn't an ordinary servant. It was even possible that this person had some other great unsolved secret. At that moment, he pinched the tentacle and felt Cyanegis's spiritual power seep into his palm. But not only did it not break his spirit, it was like pouring coffee into his mouth, making his mental state even better than before. This couldn't be considered a mental attack at all. On the contrary, it was a kind of spiritual recharge for him. At that moment, he thought that if he used this to recharge himself when he reviewed how to keep his marks down before an exam, it would be much more effective than drinking 8 walnuts. He had thought that this match would be the same as before, and that the more he fought, the more boring it would become. Who would have thought that this tentacle would instead make him even more spirited? This time, Wang Ling didn't even yawn. He directly grabbed the outer god's tentacle which he had caught from Star River Pinglai and pulled it out of the ground. Then, a horrifying scene happened. Wang Ling directly dragged the tentacle with his tiny body and directly pulled Xianagus up. Wang Ling gripped the mountainous mass of dark black flesh in his hand along with the tentacle. There was a loud boom. Dragging the tentacle, Wang Ling started to spin Xianagus on the spot. He didn't show any mercy as he directly smashed Xianagus left and right with a very relaxed expression on his face. It was hard to imagine that a human teenager would actually grab an outer god's tentacle and rub it against the ground without any dignity at all. Everyone felt a strong sense of suffocation. Wang Ling was too strong, worthy of being a man with the bearing of an immortal king. His every move could make heaven and earth tremble, and the entire Penglai planet tremble. Everyone watching the battle was so shocked that their jaws dropped to the ground. As Xianagus was continuously smashed back and forth by Wang Ling, the space here shattered and the void collapsed. This poor mother goddess of darkness was so beaten that she couldn't even speak. Before she could let out those sharp cries of anger, Wang Ling had directly swallowed them back into his stomach. Of course, apart from sighing at Wang Ling's heaven-defying strength, everyone present was also astonished by the outer god's astonishing amount of blood. Because this blood was indeed thick, how could a normal cultivator withstand a single slap from Wang Ling? Even someone as strong as Monk Golden Lamp could only withstand 10 of Wang Ling's palms at most. This outer god, Xianagus, had already been repeatedly smashed by Wang Ling more than 20 times and was almost smashed into a meat patty, but she still looked skillful and at ease, which was indeed frightening. After smashing her for the 30th time, Wang Ling exercised the muscles in his neck. He took off East Great Emperor's outer clothes and only wore the white undershirt, then rolled up his sleeves. Warm up, over. At that moment, he stared at Xianagus, who looked like he had already passed out on the ground. It was an extremely short sentence, but it caused everyone present and Ping Shiren, who was in the secret chamber, to be horrified. What had they just heard? Warm up. That magnificent scene of him beating up an outer god just now was actually just a warm-up. Damn it, he had done it again. Chapter 1911. Who on earth was it? The moment Wang Ling took off his robe and rolled up his sleeves, it was as if Ping Shiren saw the back of a god radiating brilliant light. He couldn't see who the person in this body was, but he could directly sense the glowing, powerful soul, which was the key to maintaining this body's invincibility. In the face of an outer god, a sage body was clearly not enough. As a great emperor, East Great Emperor's body had to be tempered by the vermilion bird fire every day, and his body had long reached the level of a sage body before he had become an emperor. Since then, he had been training his body day after day, and the strength of his body had continuously increased. This kind of body was indeed much stronger than that of the ancient cultivators of the royal family. However, in the battle with the outer god, Wang Ling could still clearly feel that this body wasn't strong enough. During the process of smashing the outer god just now, East Great Emperor's body had also felt a faint pain because of the tremendous force that had attacked the outer god and the backlash. But it was only East Great Emperor who was in pain, because he was the owner of this body. Although he was controlling it, he was also a little irritated by the East Great Emperor's wails. Thus, he had taken off his robe and planned to use a secret technique on this body to make it stronger than before. At that moment, East Great Emperor's upper body glowed with golden light, and runes appeared all over it. These weren't spirit talismans, nor were they mysterious characters from ancient times, nor were they the characters of any tribe in the universe. Instead, they exuded a powerful divinity that seemed to come from the origin of the universe. Mark of an immortal king. Wang Ying was secretly astonished and horrified. Even he hadn't expected Wang Ling to use this method at a critical moment. This was a secret technique that combined a life-bonded Dharma idol with a designated soul and body, and was completely under Wang Ling's control. Once the fusion was achieved, a glittering mark of divinity would appear on the body. As Wang Ling's shadow, Wang Ying was well aware of the origin of this technique. If the person he was facing wasn't a strong enemy, there was no way Wang Ling would use this technique at this time. He had only used his natal Dharma idol once a long time ago, and at that time, it hadn't reached the point of directly combining it with his natal Dharma idol in battle, and had mostly been used to intimidate and awe. This time, when Wang Ying saw that East Great Emperor's body was densely covered with marks of an immortal king, she clearly knew that Wang Ling was serious. He wasn't just joking when he said the warm-up was over. Boss. With the support of the mark of an immortal king, the East Great Emperor's fair and delicate body was strengthened even more. His body seemed to have become the center of the universe. Vaguely, they could see the sun, moon, and stars revolving around the East Great Emperor's body. With the support of the mark of an immortal king, his physical body had evolved into an immortal king body. Directly nurturing the embryonic form of the universe within one's physical body was horrifying. Xiao! In the next moment, the East Great Emperor moved. His speed was extremely fast, and his boundless magic power allowed him to approach Cyanagis without any hindrance. Rumble! With a stomp of his foot, the ground collapsed. It was as if an infinite number of cosmic stars had crashed into the ground from beyond the heavens, causing the ground under his feet to quake and sparks to fly like a volcanic eruption. Endless sacred fires collided and turned into huge mushroom clouds that boiled over. Cyanagis roared in pain as she was burnt, and her tentacles were scorched. Wang Ling's foot directly stepped on the stomach of the Mother Goddess of Darkness, instantly setting her body ablaze, and the flames spread along the tentacles to the lower half of her body. In that instant, Cyanagis could be seen spitting out a lot of mucus, which she used to fill the sacred fires on her body. Although it looked like she was being one-sidedly beaten, she didn't give up resisting. Her powerful self-healing ability allowed her burnt tentacles to regrow. At the same time, Wang Ling also noticed that Cyanagis had spat out many pitch-black meatballs. These were creatures that she had nurtured. In the first wave, there were more than 100 meatballs the size of mountains, and they immediately split open a few seconds after they hit the ground. These were creatures of the past that had been bred from her mother's body. They were terrifying behemoths called black goats. Even in their infancy, each of them was shockingly large and had amazing battle strength, as if they could crush everything with their iron hooves. At the same time, in Wang Ling's opinion, this kind of reproductive ability was indeed amazing. Even when she had been completely beaten by him, she could still breed so many monsters. This was what was terrifying about this Mother Goddess of Darkness. If Wang Ling hadn't been here, even the Great Emperor might not have been able to withstand this wave of attack. These black goats were already very amazing in their infancy. As long as there were 10 of them, it wouldn't be a problem at all for them to destroy Pinglai. But now, there were hundreds of them being bred and unbred here. The Mother Goddess of Darkness had a powerful reproductive ability that allowed her to continuously create armies of black goats. At the same time, these black goats also had amazing reproductive abilities. Unfortunately, in the end, Cyanagis had miscalculated, because the person it was facing at that moment wasn't an ordinary person. Wang Ling moved extremely quickly. He directly grabbed a black goat in the air and unceremoniously slammed it into Cyanagis. Wang Ling controlled the mountain-sized goat effortlessly with the power of cosmic gravity. He just stood where he was and slowly raised his hands. In an instant, the imposing manner of a sovereign descending upon the world flourished. Everyone was stupefied. No one had ever seen Wang Ling use a great spell in succession. In the past, this would have been a problem that could be solved with a few slaps at most. At that moment, the youngster stood in the middle of the field with the help of East Great Emperor's body. His every movement exuded the peerless and incomparable might of an immortal king. It was as if time and space here had been cut off, and countless black goats were directly lifted up by Wang Ling. Golden light seeped out from their bodies and slowly surged along their bodies. It seeped out from every pore of their bodies and cracked open, crack. The next second, the moment Wang Ling's palms closed, their bodies instantly exploded. Too strong. Is he still human? After being branded with a mark of an immortal king, East Great Emperor no longer felt pain in his body. Not only did he stop screaming, but he also remained quiet and gasped the entire time. This senior Wong's strength was beyond his expectations. Those were hundreds of black goats. The army of outer gods, which had been bred from the body of the mother goddess of darkness, had descended densely here. They had thought that they would be able to trample Pinglai to pieces. In the end, they hadn't been bouncing around for long before they were all caught in the air and turned to dust under Wong Ling's long-range explosions. Chapter 1912. So strong, Lotus Sun was moved, and her eyes were unconsciously drawn to Wong Ling. Although he now looked like East Great Emperor, the youthful vibe that he exuded when he raised his hands and feet couldn't be concealed just from his back. In a blur, it was as if she could see East Great Emperor's back and Wong Ling's back overlapping. This time, Wong Ling's attack was magnificent, shocking even gods and ghosts alike. It was a true display of godly might, and everyone at the scene was overwhelmed with emotions. The steward of the Ping family and the servants of the Ping family who had gathered around to receive protection from Zhan Zong and the others were all dumbfounded. Their mouths were so wide open that an ostrich egg could almost be swallowed. Wong Ling was too fierce and simply invincible. The way he stood where he was and swept away everything was extremely domineering, but his rock-solid and unmoving posture also showed that he was at ease. This wasn't the most terrifying thing. Because those who knew Wong Ling well knew that this still wasn't his strongest combat strength, because his talisman seal hadn't been removed. Even when he was controlling East Great Emperor's body with his soul, the power of his soul was maximized the moment the talisman seal was removed. That was to say, Wong Ling was still able to beat up an outer god even though he was sealed. Furthermore, this Dark Mother God had already grown to a high level. Although she hadn't completely reached a high level, Wong Ling's skillful and effortless manner was enough to prove that it was useless even if she had reached a high level. The moment Wong Ling grabbed hundreds of black goats and crushed them with his immortal king's mystic power, roar. This Dark Mother God immediately roared. It was as if her nerves had been severed, and she let out a pained roar as dark purple outer god blood gushed out of the wounds on her body. Although she had a strong self-healing ability, she was still exhausted after being abused by Wong Ling for a long time, and her healing speed was clearly much slower than before. This was the effect of Wong Ling's Mark of an Immortal King, which had 81 restrictive spells on it at the same time to directly block all possibilities of recovery and resurrection. But even in this situation, this Mother God of Darkness was still able to heal herself very weakly, which was something that Wong Ling was slightly astonished about. After all, it was rare for him to meet such a tough guy. But according to Wong Ling's calculations, the hundreds of black goats he had just crushed to death were a heavy blow to the Mother God of Darkness. According to its original plan, it was going to buy time by creating these black goats so that it could evolve to an advanced state, and then continuously produce new black goat armies. Unfortunately, its plan failed. Wong Ling had crushed this flock of black goats too quickly. It had only been a few dozen seconds since he had summoned them, but not a single one was left. In its original judgment, its black goat army would not be so weak. Even if it only summoned 2, it would be enough to keep the youth busy for a while. However, it miscalculated, and it even had to face the concentrated soul backlash of several hundred black mountain goats exploding at the same time. Even though the Mother Goddess of Darkness was doing her best to stabilize her body, the concentrated backlash still caused her huge flesh to ripple. Puff! Within its body, part of Ping Basin's body was spat out. Originally, Ping Basin's entire body had been swallowed up, leaving only a painful and hideous face. Her entire body was like a thumbtack embedded deeply into the huge piece of meat. But now, Ping Basin's upper body had been completely spat out, which meant that Xianagus had already broken free of Ping Basin's control. This was an excellent opportunity for everyone to realize that the next moment might be the decisive moment. Even at this time, Wang Ling was still as calm as ever. His feet didn't move, and he was like a strong pine tree rooted to the ground. Bzzzt. Wang Ling raised his index finger and abruptly pointed at Xianagis's body. With a clang, there was an earth-shattering sound, like the collision of a great Tao bell, and a dazzling golden light. No one could clearly see how Wang Ling had guided the outer god with this finger. Wang Ling didn't move from his spot, but from a distance, he had poked a huge hole in the outer god's body. And this was far from over. The aurora at Wang Ling's fingertip carried world-shaking power as it bombarded the outer god in wave after wave like divine arrows piercing the sky. The outer god was clearly already powerless to resist, and the huge piece of flesh collapsed like meat on a chopping board waiting to be cut. Wang Ling used the strength of his fingers to precisely separate Ping Basin's body from the outer gods as perfectly as possible. It's done. The moment Ping Basin completely fell off the huge piece of flesh, Golden Lamp instantly took action. Together with the clothes that Lotus Sun, Lu Qingyi and Yu Yuqing had prepared, Golden Lamp rushed forward and caught Ping Basin as she fell off the piece of flesh, completely unafraid of the outer god. The outer god had already completely broken down, so Monk Golden Lamp was fearless when he made his move. Only the monk, who usually didn't get close to women, would have any objections if he personally took action. What was more, the monk was now playing the role of an empress, and this scene looked extremely beautiful from a distance, so it didn't feel out of place at all. Only after the monk had successfully caught Ping Basin did Wang Ling nod to himself and start to prepare for his next move with confidence. He leaped up into the air, and the mark of an immortal king all over his body seemed to come to life as it moved forward from his body and gathered in his palm bit by bit. There was a loud bang. Wang Ling's palm moved forward, and the huge mark of an immortal king turned into a giant net that directly fell from the sky and enveloped the huge piece of flesh of the mother god of darkness. This was the sealing king palm, derived from the mark of an immortal king. With one palm, it could suppress all things. Xianagis had already been beaten to a critical point and couldn't put up any resistance at all. Now, with this palm, it was immediately bound. It had no strength to resist at all, and even its roars were firmly suppressed by Wang Ling's palm seal. When the runes of the mark of an immortal king climbed onto Xianagis's body, the runes immediately began to shrink inward in all directions, compressing the black piece of flesh infinitely. The runes on it immediately began to shrink inwards, compressing the black piece of flesh infinitely. The dark mother goddess body was like a piece of boiled pork that was filled with water. In the end, it was only the size of a small building block. It was hard to imagine that such a powerful outer god could actually be sealed away just like that. Seeing that Ping Basin had been rescued and the outer god had been completely sealed, Ping Shiren, who had been hiding in the secret room all this time, finally couldn't hold back anymore. He trembled with anger and was about to rush out. In the end, he hadn't expected Wang Ling to have already sensed him. Before he could move, the ground above his secret room was completely flipped open with a wave of the young man's hand. At that moment, Wang Ling stood on the edge with his hands behind his back and gazed down at him. Chapter 1913. Even Wang Ling himself never thought that his next meeting with Ping Shiren would actually be an immemorial. He looked at Ping Shiren's shocked face and could not help but sigh in his heart. Compared to the current Ping Shiren, the primordial era's Ping Shiren was still too weak. The current Ping Shiren had not even reached the ancestor realm. However, given Ping Shiren's age, it would not be an exaggeration to call him a genius. At that moment, this wasn't a still image, but Ping Shiren had already been scared stiff by Wang Ling's sudden appearance. Wang Ling felt very helpless. He clearly hadn't used any body immobilizing spells or even spiritual pressure, but his aura alone was enough to make Ping Shiren's entire body go stiff. This was normal. After all, not everyone could beat up a outer god. Wang Ling had easily dealt with Cyanegus, directly sealed him, and even saved Ping Basin in passing. This operation had clearly shaken Ping Shiren's soul. Ping Shiren had always believed in the supremacy of the Great Old Ones and the supremacy of the Outer Gods. He had tried to use the power of the Outer Gods to combine with the existing cultivation techniques to create a new hybrid power. To Wang Ling, this kind of thinking was really wishful thinking. At that moment, Wang Ling jumped down from the edge and slowly walked over to Ping Shiren to examine him. For Wang Ling, a lot of things that couldn't be explained at that moment could all be explained. He suddenly understood why he had descended into the eternal past to face this script that Ping Shi and the others had twisted. He thought that the distortion of the script had nothing to do with his arrival, because even if he didn't come, the course of the eternal script would still be twisted by Ping Shiren. Apart from him, no one could fight against the Outer Gods so easily. Therefore, it was an inevitable choice for him to come to the eternal world. In order to eliminate the Outer Gods and strangle this ancient power in the cradle, he and the people of the battle sect had appeared here. Wang Ling had been a little angry at the beginning, feeling that he had been used and forced to come to eternal time. Even now, Wang Ling really wanted to know who on earth the person who had gone through so much trouble to arrange for him to come to immemorial age. But now, he suddenly realized that the truth of this matter didn't seem to be that important anymore. The only thing he was certain of was that neither the Grave Goddess nor Baizha had the ability to do so. They were just taking advantage of the opportunity. It was only because they knew that he had such a thing on him that they wanted to take advantage of the time when he was away to deal with the Wang family and capture Wang Miyu. If these two wanted to make fun of him with their abilities, they were still far from being able to do so. Sooner or later, Wang Ling would settle accounts with this group of people. Anyone who disturbed his peaceful daily life was unforgivable. At that moment, Wang Ling looked thoughtfully at his palm. In this universe, he could only think of one person who could set him up, therefore, combined with the truth in his hands. The reason why he came to the eternal world started when Qin Qin accidentally discovered that the short video blogger Li Xian, who looked like him, had suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth. If this incident had been orchestrated from start to finish, then Wang Ling was almost certain that this Li Xian was a fictional character who didn't exist at all. Similar to Baizha's brain ability, it was a chess piece created to guide the development of order. Wang Ling breathed a slight sigh of relief at this truth. If it was just a fictional character who didn't exist, he would be a lot more at ease. The eternal world, outer gods, the will of the universe, these things were too dangerous, and he didn't want innocent people to get involved. So now, Wang Ling still had to carefully think about how to explain it to classmate Qin Qin, already frozen from fear. At that moment, monk Jin Deng appeared behind Wang Ling. He had already handed Ping Basin over to Lotus Sun to take care of, and the battle sect members behind him also started to consolidate their resources and start treating Ping Basin's injuries. Large handfuls of elixirs were sent to Ping Basin's mouth as if they didn't cost anything. In any case, they were just playing characters and these elixirs weren't their own, so they didn't feel the slightest pain in using them. Wang Ling looked at Ping Shiren and nodded. To be honest, he really wanted to crush Ping Shiren to death right now. As an older brother, it was really unforgivable that he could actually do such a cruel thing to his own little sister. But now, from the perspective of history, he still needed Ping Shiren to be alive. Wang Ling took a deep breath and directly motioned for monk Jin Deng to pry open Ping Shiren's frozen palm and take away the last outer god insect sac which Ping Shiren had taken from the outer god palace. Wang Ling just glared at the insect sac, and it instantly turned into a cloud of ash. Then, he placed his palm on Ping Shiren's head and erased his memories related to the outer gods. This was to prevent Ping Shiren from developing the idea of modifying Dao ancestor Wang's legacy scroll and creating the Book of Nine Realms Yin scroll. But Wang Ling was well aware that this was only temporary. Everyone, including monk Jin Deng, was also well aware of Ping Shiren's fate. The monk sighed and said to Wang Ling telepathically, "This person is a chosen one of the outer gods." Even if we erase his memories, he might still be guided on the path of the outer god's revival. Wang Ling nodded. The monk had the same idea as him. So now, the best way was for Ping Shiren to be bound by the Taoist orthodoxy until Wang Ling was born on Earth, so that Ping Shiren could be directly supervised during this period. Thinking this, Wang Ling took out Tao ancestor Wang's Taoist legacy scroll, the Book of Nine Realms. Then, he directly opened it and pasted it on Ping Shiren's face. Let Tao ancestor Wang forcibly supervise him. This was what Wang Ling had thought of. At first, Wang Ling had actually been quite puzzled. It was reasonable to say that a Tao creator like Tao ancestor Wang wouldn't have chosen such a lousy disciple. Now Wang Ling understood. This wasn't Tao ancestor Wang's fault. After all, Wang Ling had personally chosen this Ping Shiren, so he instead started to sympathize with Tao ancestor Wang a little. By the way, monk, why does it feel like you don't know about this? At that moment, Wang Ying was suddenly curious and asked telepathically. Because looking at how things had developed, monk Jin Dang had been involved in the whole process, so it was impossible for him not to know about it. This humble monk really doesn't know about this. It's been too long. Once we return to reality, the will of the universe will correct our memories of transmigrating to immemorial time in order to restore order. At that time, I'm afraid that only President Ying and Ling Zhenren will remember this, said monk Jin Dang. The will of the universe. That is to say, the person who arranged for us to come to immemorial time is actually. At that moment, Wang Ying frowned as if he had suddenly thought of something, and a look of sudden realization appeared on his face. On Thursday, January 8th, Wang Ling and the others, who had stayed in immemorial time for a long time, finally returned to reality. Gu Xuanji and Sun Yinger, who couldn't be found in immemorial time, were also back. As the monk had said, everyone had forgotten exactly what had happened to them in immemorial time, and their minds seemed to be blank after they came back. Wang Ling vaguely felt that something wasn't right, but he didn't think about it in detail. He was too tired to care about many details. In any case, immemorial time's trajectory had returned to normal after Ping Shiren inherited Tao ancestor Wang's Taoist legacy, so Wang Ling was relieved. Now, he just wanted to get back on track as soon as possible and live a comfortable life as an ordinary person. Next, he just had to get Lotus Sun to find Chen Qin and come up with a reason to explain the disappearance of the video blogger Li Xian to complete the task. When Wang Ling got home that day, he turned on his phone and was bombarded by a series of messages. Even Wang Ling himself hadn't expected that there would be so many people in class who cared about him after just one day of absence. In a WeChat group called 60 Men's Gang. The first thing he saw was Hero Guo's cordial concern. Hey, Lingzi, are you okay? If you're not, just come out and reply. Do you know that big brother Wu Jian in the entertainment industry? I have an uncle who said he's already in prison. I heard that he wasn't well behaved in the cell, and tried to open the lock with a toothpick, which directly added to his crime. You didn't go in with him, did you? Super Chen answered, what are you talking about? How could our Lingzi be that kind of person? Grin, maybe he went to save the world, funny. Wang Ling. Chapter 1914. After returning from the eternal world, due to the correction of the trajectory of the universe's will, everyone's memories of the eternal world were already hazy. But for some reason, Lotus Sun realized that she could clearly remember these things. Her instinctive sixth sense told her that Wang Ling must have done something to her, otherwise there was no reason why she was the only one who remembered those things from the eternal world. So what on earth did Wang Ling think of her now? After returning to the real world, Lotus Sun had been pondering this question. At least in the past. She had felt that Wang Ling was very far away from her, that he was someone she couldn't reach. Now, although they hadn't developed an intimate relationship, she could indeed help Wang Ling, so didn't this count as Wang Ling already viewing her as a friend? At this thought, Lotus Sun couldn't help feeling much better. Ing-er. Ing-er. She called out to Sun Yinger in her heart, wanting to ask for her opinion, but then suddenly realized that Wang Ying had called Sun Yinger over again. She was the only one left in the empty bedroom. Come to think of it, this eternal world experience was indeed a little inconceivable. Who would have thought that Sun Yinger would actually directly transmigrate into a baby's body? No wonder she hadn't been able to find her. It was Friday, January 9th. Today was the day both Wang Ling and Lotus Sun returned to school. Wang Ling used several dozen seconds to quickly go through the content of his recent lessons. After confirming that they were all cultivation knowledge that he had already grasped, he breathed a sigh of relief. You couldn't be sloppy with your studies, and you shouldn't be ashamed to ask for help if you didn't understand something. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good if you kept dragging things until the exam. For Wang Ling, studying wasn't just about learning knowledge, but also a good opportunity to understand other people's learning habits. Because only by knowing how well most people understood and mastered this knowledge would it be easier for him to predict everyone's scores in class in advance, and thus better suppress their scores. This time, Wang Ling hadn't come for 2 days, so he was a little flustered. He was afraid that if he didn't guess correctly and did too well, Old Pan would use him as a role model again. In the end, at this critical moment, it was still Wang Ying who comforted him. He was in a good mood after spending a lot of time with Sun Yinger last night. Why are you flustered? You've been in this class for so long, it would be weird if you did better than average every time. If you do well once in a while and tell others about it, it would be considered exceptional performance. On the contrary, it won't be strange. Wang Ling's eyes instantly lit up at Wang Ying's words. He felt that it made sense. That's right. Every single time, he had to suppress his scores, which made him feel pressured every single time. Occasionally, he would get an above-average score, and it wouldn't be strange. As Wang Ling pondered this, he subconsciously glanced at the empty seat in the middle of the row next to him, which was Lotus Sun's seat. Like him, Lotus Sun had started to borrow all kinds of notes to check whether she had missed anything as soon as she arrived in class. It was already noon, and she was probably busy dealing with the student union and the Great Church's commission. Sometimes, he found himself quite envious of her. At the very least, she didn't have to worry about keeping her scores low in exams, and could do well every time. Moreover, this excellence was a matter of course in everyone's eyes, and no one found it strange that Lotus Sun's results were particularly good. So this time, should he do as Wang Ying said, not consider suppressing his score? Occasionally producing above-average results. Indeed, Wang Ling felt that this was probably the most natural situation. After all, some time ago, Old Pan had begun to suspect that he had deliberately suppressed his score. In the student union office, Lotus Sun and Xia Ming were waiting solemnly. As number 60 High's newly appointed deputy minister of the Great Church branch, Xia Ming had become Wang Ling's fan ever since the Nine Dragons Mountain Conclave. Now that he had been accepted into number 60 High's student union, he was also the deputy minister of number 60 High's Great Church, and was very dutifully recording everything. Lotus Sun had already made up a story about the investigation into the missing vlogger. This video blogger actually didn't exist, because he was a virtual person created by the will of the universe. But the implications of this matter were too big, and Lotus Sun couldn't directly tell Chen Qin the whole story, so she could only work with Wang Ling to come up with a story. In fact, after the people from Heavenly Battle sect returned on January 8th, Wang Ling had used his own methods to restore Li Xian. That was to say, Li Xian was no longer a product of the universe's will, but a living person that Wang Ling had created using magic. Thus, Lotus Sun was making up this story to explain the specific reason for Li Xian's disappearance. It's like this, classmate Chen Qin. We've found Miss Li Xian, who looks a lot like you, Lotus Sun said with a straight face as she sat in the chairman's seat. Xia Ming remained silent on the side as he started typing away on the keyboard. He didn't know the specifics of how the mission would be carried out, and was only in charge of recording it. He would then write it into a report for the great church's external publicity. Yes. I know. I think she updated her short video frequency. The platform has already restored her account. Chin was also very excited. She didn't expect that her request would actually be accepted, and it was resolved in such a short time. Grace Sect, YYYDS. So, what exactly happened to this Miss Li Xian? Chin was very curious. Asking for the details of the mission was also within the scope of the client's questions. Lotus Sun had expected this question, so her expression was particularly calm. Do you know that Wu Qiao, Mr. Wu, who was recently arrested? Ah. So it was that illusionary Wu Qiao. That scumbag who specializes in using illusionary spells to coerce and bribe young girls into having improper relationships with him. Yes. Lotus Sun nodded. Ah, this Miss Li Xian is actually also a victim. But she very courageously came forward and tried to expose everything. At this point, it seemed that everything that happened next was clear. Chin had a look of sudden realization on her face. She clearly hadn't expected that her casual request would actually be so exciting. So, the reason why she suddenly disappeared was actually because of that Toothpick Wu's PR tricks. Because Miss Li wanted to report him, he tried to make her disappear. That's right. Lotus Sun stood up and firmly grasped Chin's hand. Fortunately, we found out in time, otherwise, it would have been a disaster. And thanks to classmate Chin's report, we had the chance to defeat the evil forces this time. Thank you. Classmate Chin. The cultivation world is wonderful because of you. On the side, Xiaoming was stunned as he typed. For a moment, he didn't know how to describe his feelings. He directly typed a side character on the screen. F***CK. Chapter 1915. Just like that, the fact that Wang Ling and Lotus Sun had disappeared for an entire day to carry out the Great Church mission was suppressed for the time being. With Audiobook's secret help, it could be considered a daunting experience without any mishaps. At the same time, Lotus Sun reflected on this matter. She felt that it was better not to accept these strange commissions so easily in the future. At the very least, there had to be a screening mechanism. Her original intention was to help others, but she didn't expect to be involved in a cosmic-level incident. Good heavens, she immediately said, good guy. Very good. This was very normal. Chin. Before Chin left the student union office, Lotus Sun called out to her, a little hesitant. Chin stopped in her tracks and asked, President, is there anything else you want to tell me? Lotus Sun took a deep breath and said seriously, that classmate Chin, forget about the publicity. The leader of the Great Church had just sent me a message. She said that the core of the Great Church was to keep a low profile. Wouldn't it be too ostentatious to advertise? However, if you really need help from the Great Church, you can still find them. I'll pass on the message. I also want you to stop calling me President. Just call me Rong. Aren't we going to advertise it? All right. Chin felt that it was a bit of a pity. She was the officer in charge of number 60 High's publicity department to begin with. Every time there was a sports meet or a large-scale school event, such as the Spirit Sword Exchange meet with number 59 High, she had personally written the press releases, and was very good at publicity. He had done a good deed to help others, but he kept it to himself. This decision puzzled Chin, but it was not completely incomprehensible. Moreover, she was deeply moved by this. He felt that the leader of the Great Church was too chivalrous. He had won her heart. Even if they couldn't publicize it externally, they could still spread it internally. Wasn't that how reputation was built? Word of mouth from person to person was much better than spending a lot of money on marketing. I understand, Rong. I won't post the manuscript. I respect all the decisions of the Great Church's hierarch. At this moment, Chen suddenly laughed. Oh right, Rong, speaking of which, you're an officer of the Great Church, right? Ah. Aren't you an official? How did you contact the leader of the Great Church? Oh, right. I'm an officer. That's right, if there's an opportunity. I want to meet the leader of the Great Church and thank him in person. If it's not convenient, it's fine too, Chen pleaded. Lotus Sun immediately agreed. Okay, no problem. I'll try to relay your message. Okay. After receiving the reply, Chen skipped away. Actually, Lotus Sun hadn't been very familiar with her partners in number 60 High's publicity department to begin with. Every time the student union wanted to carry out work, she would have to rely on classmates she was close with to convey the message. Lotus Sun felt that it was a pleasant surprise to be able to connect with Chen this time. Chen was the director of number 60 High's publicity department, and her words carried a lot of weight. Wang Ling was in fact particularly afraid of other people bragging about her operation in this kind of official publicity document, which had led to her having to go through a lot of trouble to secretly edit it several times before. Now that he had gotten to know Chen, it would be much easier for him to carry out his plans. Furthermore, the publicity department was also responsible for communicating with other schools. Thanks to number 60 High's victories in various provincial and municipal competitions in the last 6 months, the school's overall ranking had improved significantly nationwide and even worldwide, which gave them a lot more opportunities to communicate with other schools. That was to say, Chen had more connections than Lotus Sun had imagined. Right now, Chen happened to be a Grey Sect disciple. Lotus Sun felt that she should find a suitable opportunity to directly lay her cards on the table with Chen. Since she was the leader of the Grey Sect, it wouldn't be a bad idea to pull her into the team as a cadre. Monday, January 13th. After 2 days of revision over the weekend, Wang Ling finally dealt with the most important event in his life, the monthly exam. Furthermore, he had listened to Wang Ying's advice. This time, he hadn't suppressed his scores too much, and had gotten an above-average grade. Old Pan had already been suspicious of him, and had wondered all along whether he had deliberately suppressed his scores. Wang Ling believed that this concern would be easily resolved once he passed the exam. All the number 60 High students finished their exams on the same day, and they still had to take the usual 8 subjects. Language, mathematics, physics and chemistry, as well as Tao Talismans, Spirit Sword and Magic exams. Furthermore, most modern cultivation schools had smart exam marking systems. Apart from some big questions and essays that required logic to be written, questions like multiple choice and fill-in-the-blank could be directly graded using the floating mechanical magic ball used to mark the exam papers. Number 60 High hadn't had such a sophisticated system before, but everything had changed since Wang Ling's arrival. For example, after Wang Ling's arrival, number 60 High's national ranking among cultivation high schools had directly jumped from 81st place to 37th place. In the world, it had jumped from 370th place to 126th place. In just half a year, this was absolutely an astonishing improvement. Coupled with the assistance of Audjua, an old alumnus of number 60 High, the educational resources that number 60 High now enjoyed were indeed incomparable to before. It had originally been a lower middle high school, but now it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it a first-class high school. Thus, Wang Ling actually took the exam on the same day, and the results were out. Like everyone else, they were directly entered into the computer and the rankings were automatically generated. That evening, number 60 High's teacher's office was brightly lit. The teachers hadn't left, and were busy reading the rankings of the key students they were concerned about. They were especially serious. Even Headmaster Chin and Vice Headmaster Monk Golden Lamp had personally come to watch the rankings for this time's monthly exam. That was right, because the results of this monthly exam were actually very important, and would directly determine the list of participants for the Provincial Cultivation High School Freshman Ranking Competition, which had suddenly been held at the end of the month. The previous few times, the list had almost all been chosen from Teacher Pan's class, which had led to more or less complaints from the teachers from other classes. Although they had won the competition smoothly in the end, many of the teachers weren't happy with some of the students who had obviously slacked off, even if they didn't say anything. For example, Wang Ling. In the eyes of the teachers from other classes, Wang Ling's grades were actually very average. But it was outrageous that he could be a mascot every time. So this time, Headmaster Chen directly decided to determine the order of participants based on the monthly exam rankings. Because of this, the teachers didn't have any objections. After all, the monthly exam was the best indicator of a student's current situation. But when the rankings came out, all the teachers were dumbfounded. F***K, what's going on with Wang Ling's monthly exam this time? Why did he rise so much in the whole grade? Some teachers were directly horrified. Wang Ling's grades in each subject weren't that conspicuous on the rankings, and were only a dozen or so points higher than in the previous exam. In the end, Wang Ling's name was directly recorded in the first place by the system on the rankings. Headmaster Chen seemed to have already expected this result, and couldn't help laughing. Student Wang Ling isn't bad. It seems that old Pan has been very strict with him recently. No. Teacher Pan shook her head modestly. Wang Ling has been smart since he was young. As the teacher in charge, she was actually already overjoyed. Teacher Pan had actually been the most nervous about this exam, because Wang Ling's grades had been stuck in the middle, and she had even been questioned by the other teachers about her teaching ability. But now, with Wang Ling's extraordinary performance in this exam, all the problems had been easily solved. Wang Ling. I haven't doted on you for nothing. Teacher Pan was extremely moved. His extraordinary performance at this critical moment was simply timely assistance, and allowed her to hold her head high in the rankings in this monthly exam, which so many teachers were paying attention to. It seems that the headmaster had anticipated the rankings this time. At that moment, some of the other teachers were curious. Actually, I know that a lot of teachers are paying attention to this student Wang Ling. So before the results came out, I specifically asked Director Zhuo for his opinion. As Headmaster Chen spoke, he flashed his phone. The teachers realized that Zhuo had just sent Headmaster Chen a group photo of the 7 Calabash brothers rescuing their grandfather. A photo of the Calabash brothers. What does that mean? Director Zhuo is really an old riddle man. One teacher ridiculed. Well, I think what Director Zhuo is trying to say is, as long as you work hard, you'll definitely get something out of it. In the end, the Calabash brothers still managed to rescue their grandfather through their own efforts, didn't they? At that moment, the vice headmaster, Monk Golden Lamp, sighed silently in his heart. He had just texted Zhuo to ask what on earth this meant. Zhuo had told him. There were indeed 7 hard-working Calabash brothers. But there was only one grandfather. Chapter 1916. That night, Wang Ling actually had a faint sense of foreboding. When he got home, the eyelid warning, which hadn't been activated for a long time, started up again, and it was at that ghostly frequency, which meant that something big was about to happen. Wang Ling subconsciously thought that this was a butterfly effect, caused by his failure to accurately suppress his score this time. So when he got home, he put down his bag and started glaring at Wang Ying. Wang Ying, on the other hand, was still leaning against the wall with her arms crossed as if nothing had happened. His entire body was numb from Wang Ling's glare, and in the end, he could only spread his hands. Then, Commander. I think that even if I'm to blame for this, you can't blame me entirely. I only made an immature suggestion. Who knew that you would accept it? For a moment, Wang Ling was speechless. But with his personality, it was very easy for him to be fooled. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. After careful consideration, he felt that Wang Ying really couldn't be blamed for this. He could only blame himself for being too innocent and too well-behaved. Of course, he didn't dare tell Father and Mother Wang about this after he came back, for fear that Father Wang would find an excuse to dock his allowance again. But Wang Ling knew that the truth couldn't be contained, and Father and Mother Wang would find out sooner or later. But what he hadn't expected was that Father and Mother Wang would find out much faster than he had imagined. When the couple saw Wang Ling walk in with a gloomy expression on his face, take off his shoes and head straight for the room without a word, they sensed that something wasn't right in the gloomy atmosphere. Although Wang Ling was usually an expressionless person, after all, he had lived for more than 10 years. Father and Mother Wang were all too familiar with their son's temperament, as well as his ability to judge and analyze specific situations through micro-expressions. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call them experts. A normal parent would definitely think that the child was blaming himself for the poor results of the monthly test. But Father and Mother Wang were different. Did you do too well this time? Wang Ma asked. It should be. Father Wang put down the newspaper and sighed with a sad expression on his face. How many times have I told him? You have to suppress your scores. You don't have to do so well. Being too outstanding would attract too much attention. How many times had he participated in the competition? Little Josie and Ah Ming have to clean up after us every time. Hearing this, Mother Wang shook her head. I think it's fair to say that Ling Ling wasn't the one who wanted to go in the last few competitions. Given all these factors, plus Teacher Pan's forceful request, he has no choice but to listen. Also, apart from that time when Ling Ling entered the school, when hasn't he been suppressing his grades? Wasn't he supposed to be sent? I suspect. Father Wang was startled, and then suddenly understood. Are you saying that Ling Ling has already been exposed? I don't think I'll be exposed. Mother Wang shook her head. My guess is that the teachers from number 60 high school are testing him. And as far as I know, because Ling Ling has been suppressing his scores time and time again, the teacher has already become suspicious. That's why I feel that doing a little better occasionally is a way to dispel the teacher's concerns. After listening to Mother Wang's analysis, Father Wang felt that what she said actually made sense. However, the Wang family's rules were set a long time ago and couldn't be easily changed. If he did well in the exam, his allowance would be deducted. If he got first place in the grade, he would be directly fined an entire year's allowance. Mother Wang still felt very sorry for Wang Ling, and as she worked, she couldn't help saying, the child is very pitiful, don't be too stubborn this time. But I still have to punish him, I know what I'm doing. I'll let it go this time. Father Wang sighed. How could he not know that Wang Ling hadn't been easy, so he decided to punish him a little less this time. A 1 yuan penalty was enough as a token gesture. Thus, even if Wang Ling hadn't said anything, based on their understanding of him, Father Wang and Mother Wang could already guess what had happened. Wang Ling felt that parents were always their children's roundworms. There were even times when he wondered whether Father Wang and Mother Wang also had the mind-reading ability. How could they know so much about him so easily? Of course, for Wang Ling, his nightmare today was far more than that. Because that very night, Teacher Pan directly called him. She called the Wang family's small villa. As soon as she got off the phone, she lavished Wang Ling with praise. Teacher Pan, amazing. Amazing. Mr. Wang. Although your son's grades in each subject only improved a little this time, he's directly ranked first in the grade. Father Wang, teacher, how can there be a ranking list like this? Teacher Pan, our number 60 high school has always advocated diversity. The various ranking lists are set up to give every child a chance to look at themselves from multiple perspectives, so that they can find out what their strengths and weaknesses are. To be honest, I always thought that this child Wang Ling deliberately didn't do well in the exams. Father Wang, then this time, on the other end of the line, Teacher Pan couldn't stop smiling. But this time, faced with such a difficult exam paper, Wang Ling not only stabilized his usual level, but his grades in each subject also went up quite a bit online. Student Wang's overall ranking soared in one go. Father Wang was already wiping at his sweat on the other end of the line. Teacher Pan, you probably didn't call me just to say that Ling Ling did well in the exams this time. Father Wang was already wiping at his sweat as he spoke. Teacher Pan, you probably didn't call me just to say that Ling Ling did well in the exams this time. It's like this, Mr. Wang, your child is too outstanding. Furthermore, our school has placed first in the last few competitions in which he participated, so I want to recommend him to participate in the Provincial Cultivation High School new student ranking list this time. Father Wang took a deep breath. Sure enough, as he had expected, what was supposed to come had come. In an old alley in the depths of Vermilion Bird Gate in Songhai City, there was a tea house that had been open for a long time, and a young man in a black trench coat was shuttling through it. Vermilion Bird Gate had been built during the cultivation era 2,000 years ago, and had a history of more than 2,000 years. During the imperial era, it had been the main passageway for the emperor to transport supplies every day. Now that it had been renovated, it had become a tourist attraction in Songhai City. Apart from a few more shops, it still retained its original style. The city walls, the arrow towers, the moat, it was as if they could travel back in time 2,000 years. A lot of students were gathered here. Because Vermilion Bird Gate's coordinates happened to be in the center of several key cultivation high schools in Songhai City, it had become a frequent gathering spot for students. At around 6:00 in the evening, the man in the black trench coat walked along the old alley, looking a little out of place among the students in various school uniforms. He walked up to the tea house where he had made an appointment and knocked on the wooden door. This was an old tea house, and the words, 9 Heavens, were written on a horizontal board in front of the door. Who is it? The lights in the tea house suddenly lit up, and a rough voice came from inside. I'm Jing Hicho, and I'm here to discuss the Provincial Cultivation High School new student ranking list this time. The man took off his hat in front of the door and introduced himself respectfully. Chapter 1917. The man who called himself Jing Hicho waited for a while in the 9 Heavens tea house before he heard the sound of the old-fashioned wooden door being moved. He pushed the door open and entered, then carefully closed the door. As soon as he entered, he saw a bare-chested old man with white hair pouring tea. His muscles were very strong and looked rather exaggerated, and his figure was even better than that of some young people. Jing Hicho immediately smiled. I'm relieved to see that Mr. Tang is still in good spirits. No need for pleasantries. Ting Lu Ken smiled and pushed a cup of hot tea in front of Jing Hicho. You didn't come to me today just to talk about a new student list, did you? There's no need to play riddles between us. Just pour out whatever you have in your gourd. Jing Hicho couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. A new student list? If you don't care about the new student list, why did you ask me to set up the 9 Heavens Search Institute to find talents from the younger generation? Why do you stay in this 9 Heavens tea house all year round? Isn't it because you want to be closer to these young students? 9 Heavens Search Institute. As the name suggests, it means that you want to find the elites of the 9 Heavens. What is the 9 Heavens? The 9 Heavens symbolizes the vitality of the sky and the world, and is synonymous with young cultivators. After searching for so many young cultivators for so many years, I believe that you already have a list of them, which is why you directly requested to hold a new student list. Jing Hicho didn't hold back at all. With just a few words, he cut right to the chase. Also, I suddenly received an order from the higher-ups to form a new ranking list for the cultivation high schools at the provincial level. I found it strange. Logically speaking, no one can carry out plans for cultivation schools without the approval of the Alliance of 10,000 Schools, except for you, sir. His words seemed very rude, but Ting Lucan didn't mind at all. What he hated the most was talking in riddles, and he liked to lay everything out in front of people. Jing Hichio knew Elder Ting's temper very well, so his bluntness suited Ting Luchan's temperament. If it was anyone else who didn't know Ting Lucan well, they definitely wouldn't dare to speak like that. This was an important figure that even the 10 generals would tremble in fear when they saw him. Needless to say, Jing Hichio felt like he did not know everything about the man in front of him. Perhaps everything he knew was just the surface, and most of it was just immature guesses that he came up with after dealing with Mr. Ting for many years. You are quite sharp. Ting Lucan stretched his neck, crossed his arms, and stared at Jing Hichio. What else do you know? Why don't you tell me more? I'll decide if I want to continue talking to you after listening. I also know something about a big plan. Jing Hichio said calmly, Elder Ting and that lord have been planning this grand plan for hundreds of years. Moreover, the selection of elites from these youths was ultimately for the sake of this grand plan. It is precisely because of the danger that we must find talents among talents, the elites of the elites. Am I right, Elder Ting? Ting Lucan closed his eyes and sighed. That lord told you about the Earth Core project, right? Jing Hichio was silent for a while and laughed. What else? Elder Ting, how else do you think I would have access to such a secret grand plan with my position? Ever since Earth leveled up, the battle for resources in the core world had already begun. Ting Lucan sat up straight and said, the cultivation academies of the various countries all believe that the core world has precious resources that the cultivation world doesn't. However, everyone wants to fight for this piece of cake, but it is not that easy. Thus, Elder Ting decided to set up this battle for resources as a competition and let the youths be the representatives. They think that they are only participating in a competition, but in fact, they are fighting on behalf of the various cultivation countries. That wasn't the original plan. I can only say that it was a helpless move. Ting Lucan shook his head and suddenly smiled bitterly. Now, all the countries are preparing their own teams of youths. And we have the privilege to bring an extra team of 7 people in. Why do we have such a privilege? Before Earth leveled up, all the countries were trying their best to open the entrance to the core world. But it is easier said than done to open the entrance to the core world. Ting Lucan sat up straight and said, but recently, that lord and I inadvertently discovered that there's a natural entrance in our Songhai city. Natural entrance? Not at all. Speaking up to this point, Ting Lucan paused for a moment, then continued, do you know of a natural wonder near the sea on the outskirts of Songhai city? Elder Ting, are you talking about the Palm Cliff of Heaven? But legend says that this handprint was made by an almighty. But legend is just legend, no one has such palm strength. When Ting Lucan said this, the two of them looked at each other, and Jing Hichio suddenly looked enlightened. Elder Ting, you mean, it can't be, I can't be wrong. Ting Lucan said with certainty, although we still can't analyze what kind of natural phenomenon this is, the first and only natural entrance to the core world on Earth is at the bottom of this palm cliff. It was Tuesday, January 14th, the day after the monthly exam. Although everyone knew that the results were out, the administration office still had no intention of directly announcing it, which made Wang Ling very nervous. I heard the results will be announced a few days later. The school has been dealing with people in white coats for the past 2 days. White coats. Doctors. What are doctors doing at school? They might not necessarily be doctors. I think they might be people from the Cultivation Research Institute. On the way to school, Wang Ling's ears twitched, and he overheard some insightful number 60 high alumni gossiping. These were all senior students. High grade 2 and 3 were out of school later than grade 1 freshmen, on average, by 1 to 2 hours. That was to say, although number 60 high had very cautiously chosen a time after school to receive them, it was likely that a small group of students who had left late had seen them, and the news had then directly spread. But whether or not they were from the Cultivation Research Institute, Wang Ling didn't know yet. Because if they were, he would definitely be able to get some information from Wang Ming in advance. But that idiot brother of his hadn't even sent him a text message, nor had he given any hint, which wasn't Wang Ming's style at all. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if they were from the Cultivation Research Institute, Wang Ling felt that they probably weren't on Wang Ming's side. Why would they visit the school at night? And what on earth were they talking about? He was very curious about this. Chapter 1918. Apart from the problem with the talisman, Wang Ling rarely took the initiative to send Wang Ming a text message. This time, too many strangers had suddenly entered number 60 high, which gave Wang Ling a faint uneasy feeling. Therefore, in the morning, Wang Dekong kept reminding himself not to meddle in other people's business. It was better to avoid trouble than trouble. In the end, he still couldn't help taking out his phone to send Wang Ming a message to ask about the situation. Sure enough, gossip and curiosity were contagious. Wang Ling remembered that he hadn't always been a curious baby, but after spending so much time with Hero Gua and Super Chin, it seemed that he had naturally developed this bad habit. Of course, it wasn't just Wang Ling who was curious about this matter. Almost all of grade 1, class 3 had been mobilized. It could only be said that as number 60 high's elite class, grade 1, class 3 was in the end grade 1, class 3. Apart from academic matters, it seemed that they always paid more attention to external matters than to academic matters. Almost all of them were displaying their remarkable abilities. Before Wang Ming could reply, Lotus Sun stepped into the classroom. The two of them looked at each other, then Lotus Sun said, "I've already asked around, it's people from Sacred College." Wang Ling nodded his head. He hadn't expected Lotus Sun to be the first to find out. But this wasn't strange. After all, number 60 High Student Union was in fact the Great Church's headquarters. The Great Church's branches were now branching out both domestically and abroad. It might be difficult to ask around about other things, but if these people were from the school, it would be too easy. But why would people from Sacred College suddenly visit number 60 High? No student would be unfamiliar with the name Sacred College. Because Sacred Sciences was Sacred Sciences Academy. It was currently the number 1 high school in Huaxiu Nation, and ranked 3rd in the world. It was even more amazing than number 1 Devil Subduing High School or even Maelstrom Imperial High School in Mixiu Nation's Glio City. So what was number 60 High's current ranking? Wang Ling remembered that number 60 High was currently ranked 37th in the country and 126th in the world, after he had won several major competitions since his arrival. But even so, it could only be considered an upper-middle cultivation high school. It was a far cry from a top academy like Sacred College. So it was reasonable to say that Sacred College and number 60 High had nothing to do with each other. In the end, Saint Ke had suddenly come knocking on his door, which made him feel extremely strange. The point was that it was impossible for Audjua, the director of Songhai City's General Administration of 100 schools, to not know about this sort of schoolyard matter, but until now, Audjua hadn't revealed anything to him. This also meant that even Audjua didn't know about this. To be able to directly bypass the general administration of 100 schools and directly contact number 60 high school while avoiding Audjua, this meant that they didn't care about Audjua at all. Wang Ling was instantly amused. Ever since Audjua had embarked on this path, with the help and guidance of Sun Dakong, the head of the Alliance of 10,000 Schools, his career could be said to have been smooth sailing. In half a year, he had earned 3 first-class merits and various second-class merits, which added up to no less than 10 honors, which was simply unimaginable to ordinary people. A lot of people knew that Audiobook was very popular and rushed to curry favor with him. Although Audiobook was polite and kept his distance, he could be considered to have scrupulously abided by his heart and remained unsullied by the mud, but there were still very few people who didn't regard him as a green onion. After all, it was Sacred Sciences. Sure enough, the #1 academy in the country's cultivation world had this kind of confidence. It wasn't just the instructors and teachers here, even the students could walk around with their heads held high. This was unique in the country's educational system, which focused on collective honor. As students of the #1 academy, they naturally felt proud of their alma mater. At Sacred Sciences, some powerful young geniuses were even more popular, and would appear on the internet's top searches from time to time. It was because Wang Ling had seen so many of these types of hot searches that he understood everything when Lotus Sun mentioned Sacred Sciences just now. Those famous students from Sacred Sciences were so popular that even celebrities and internet celebrities couldn't compare. It wasn't that Wang Ling was exaggerating, this was indeed the case. Almost subconsciously, he unlocked his phone and opened Weibo. 2 of the top 10 trending topics were related to Sacred Sciences. One was about a student from Sacred Sciences who had won a gold medal in an alchemy competition abroad. The person who had refined the pills was called Su Xingyue, and she was one of Sacred Sciences' female star students. Her alchemy skills were superb, and she had even competed with Immortal Toya on the same stage. At that time, Su Xingyue, who was only 13 years old, had almost defeated Immortal Toya, who was very famous in the alchemy circle. Wang Ling still remembered this piece of news to this day. The other was about Chu Yiling, the president of Sacred Sciences Student Union, but this piece of news looked a little like gossip. The photo didn't capture Chu Yiling's face, and only showed the back of a teenager who looked a little like Chu Yiling eating barbecue with girls. The teenager was shirtless, very fair, and had a very good figure. The accompanying headline was, "Shocking." The president of Sacred Sciences Student Union is suspected of abusing his power to lead new student union members to break the ice and win them over. Wang Ling knew at a glance that this was fake news. Although the person in the photo did look a little like Chu Yiling's back, this kind of rumor was really too exaggerated. For someone like Chu Yiling to be able to sit in the position of president of the student union, he was a genius among geniuses, and would definitely advance to the nascent soul stage before he graduated from high school. There was no way such a person would easily indulge in barbecue, let alone use his position to play dirty tricks. After determining that it was gossip, Wang Ling couldn't be bothered to read any more, and quickly turned off his phone. But this gossip hot search also showed that Sacred Sciences' level of attention in the industry was astonishing. Students like Chu Yiling and Su Xingyue, who had become famous at a young age, already had no lack of cultivation resources. They could earn a lot of money just by being a spokesperson, and they could exchange it for all kinds of rare cultivation resources. It was almost like a snowball operation. But becoming famous at a young age also came with a price, and that was being watched by all sides. To a certain extent, they would lack freedom, and everyone would be watching their every move. Under this kind of attention, Wang Ling even felt that it was difficult for them to even breathe. Thus, Wang Ling was really glad that he could study and live at number 60 high school. Although he would occasionally run into some trouble, at least he lived a very secretive and carefree life, and even his study life was relatively quiet. Just as Wang Ling was sighing with emotion, Heartwarming's excited voice instantly came from outside the door. He had initially gone to ask around, but hadn't found anything. Instead, he had found out about the results of the monthly test this time. As soon as he entered the classroom, Heartwarming's excited voice rang out. "Holy shit! Wang Ling! You're number 1 on the rising list of the entire grade. Awesome, Lingzi. Damn. Awesome." Wang Ling immediately dropped a headache to his forehead at this outburst. This slap in the face had come too suddenly, and he decided to take back what he had just said about his quiet study life. Chapter 1919. Wang Ling shuddered at Hirogua's shout. He had never realized that there would come a day when this guy's voice could actually be so loud. Now, the whole class's eyes began to focus on Wang Ling, and all of them had extremely astonished and incredulous expressions on their faces. Strong, Lingzi. I don't think your grades in any of the subjects have improved much, and are only 5 or 6 points higher than usual on average. How did you directly get first place on the ranking list? Little Peanut Su Xiao also had an astonished expression on his face. This was the first time that Wang Ling's ranking had risen, and he had surpassed him, the commissary in charge of studies. This was simply an epic-making day. Good heavens, it looks like he's doing exceptionally well this time. I thought Lingzi was always deliberately suppressing his score. Super Chen once again inadvertently exposed the truth, and Wang Ling wanted nothing more than to directly gag him with a blackboard eraser. Don't think too much about it, it was more difficult this time. Student Wang Ling's grades have always been more stable, which shows his advantage. It's normal for him to get first place once. When all is said and done, student Wang Ling is still luckier. Lotus Sun couldn't take it anymore, and came out to smooth things over. Wang Ling immediately gave her a grateful look. Sure enough, he knew it wasn't anything good. His eyelids had been twitching last night. Everyone, look out the window. At that moment, Lotus Sun shouted again, and everyone's attention shifted away from Wang Ling. Wang Ling raised his head and followed Lotus Sun's gaze. Through the window of the teaching building, the early morning sun just happened to break through the clouds and shine on number 60 High's school gate, forming a golden carpet. A young girl with shoulder-length hair dressed in a flame-patterned hanfu slowly strolled in through the gate. Almost everyone's attention was instantly drawn to her. Super Chen rubbed his eyes. He felt that this girl looked particularly familiar, and he subconsciously took out his phone to search for something. Then, he was stunned. Damn, isn't that Su Xingyue? Saint Prep Su Xingyue. That alchemy genius girl. One of Saint Prep's top stars. Everyone was stupefied, completely unable to believe that Su Xingyue, who had just won a gold medal at the International Alchemy Open abroad, would appear at number 60 High. It seemed that the news had actually been delayed due to the time difference. In other words, Su Xingyue had come to number 60 High as soon as she received the award. It wasn't just grade 1, class 3. After discovering Su Xingyue's arrival, almost all the students in the teaching block were in an uproar. It was everyone's first time seeing Su Xingyue in person, and it gave them a surreal feeling. Wang Ling had never expected Su Xingyue's arrival to be so lethal. In the blink of an eye, everyone in the classroom had already disappeared to the corridor to watch Su Xingyue, leaving only Wang Ling, Lotus Sun, and a few core members of Battle Sect. Lotus Sun smiled bitterly and looked at Wang Ling. Classmate Wang Ling, it seems that my attractiveness has been suppressed for the time being. Wang Ling, Gu Xuanji rubbed his chin. Looks like something big is going to happen this time. We have to prepare in advance. When Su Xingyue was 13 years old, she almost beat the Cave Immortal in a competition. However, at that time, the Cave Immortal had underestimated her. Now that she has become the champion of the International Alchemy Open's junior division, Su Xingyu's strength must be even stronger than before. Xingyuan, in any case, let's take things one step at a time. They don't come with good intentions. Gu Xuanji narrowed his eyes and smiled. Look at the way they walked through the school gate. They don't treat number 60 High as an outsider at all, and exude confidence as if they're stepping into their back garden. I'm afraid that in the eyes of First Academy students, we're the newcomers. Lotus Sun, then, seniors, do you know why on earth the people from St. Common have come to number 60 High? Both of them quickly shook their heads. Gu Xuanji, there's definitely no one who knows more about cultivation matters than Audjua, and even he doesn't know. This means that St. Common's visit this time was a direct one without any prior notice. Immortal Jin Yuan said, "There's no need to be anxious. The truth will come out sooner or later. Isn't Senior Golden Lamp also here? Furthermore, he's now the vice headmaster, so he definitely knows something. Let's wait for news from him." The first class in the morning was Old Antiques Theory of History class. As a teacher in the school administration office, Old Antique knew a lot of inside information. However, when someone in class asked about St. Common this time, Old Antique unexpectedly kept them guessing. Ahem, everyone will naturally know when the time comes. Be quiet in class first. Old Antique cleared his throat and said, "Today's lesson is about expanding knowledge about the core world. We all know that there's actually a huge core world inside the earth, where there are many powerful spirit beasts and rare spirit plants that don't exist on the surface. There's even technology hidden in the core that far surpasses our modern cultivation technology, but even after the earth is upgraded, human cultivators are still unable to directly reach the core world with current technology. Furthermore, no one knows what kind of dangers they'll encounter in the core world. Perhaps in the near future, when the entrance to the core world is completely opened and the technology is fully mature, human cultivators will be able to develop tourism and resource collection in the core world in an orderly manner. Just like when everyone went to Beast King's Remains the last time, but the unknown risks in the core world are far greater than in Beast King's Remains." Speaking up to this point, Lotus Sun was about to raise her hand to ask a question, when Teacher Pan suddenly stepped into the classroom. Just as Lotus Sun was about to raise her hand to ask a question, Teacher Pan suddenly stepped into the classroom. Although Old Pan had a habit of suddenly calling people out in the middle of class, this was the first time she had seen her in such a hurry. "Student Lotus Sun, and the students in the back row, come with me for a moment." At the back of the classroom, everyone, including Wang Ling, looked at each other in dismay. With a nod from Old Antique, Wang Ling and the others got up and lined up at the classroom door in an orderly fashion. Teacher Pan led them straight to the headmaster's office. At the same time, Su Xingyue was sitting in the principal's office, quietly sipping her tea. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Headmaster Chen immediately stood up from his chair and introduced to Su Xingyue, "Student Su Xingyue, let me introduce you. Now, the few people standing in front of you are the elites with the top scores of the various lists in this monthly test. Student Lotus Sun, Student Gu Xuanji, Student Jin Yuan, Student Wang Jin, Student Lu Qingyi, Student Super Qin, Student Hero Gua, Student Fang Xing, and Student Wang Ling, who doesn't look like he's awake." Chapter 1920. Su Xingyue's gaze swept over the crowd, and Wang Ling noticed a streak of blue light in her eyes. If one looked carefully, they would see that it was a string of data rolling around in her pupils. This wasn't an electronic eye or some kind of eye technique, but a kind of scientific magic treasure developed by St. Common. It was a multifunctional scanning contact lens that could be used to survey the terrain or detect combat strength. Magic treasures were one of the key factors for a cultivator to improve their combat strength, so it wasn't cheating to be equipped with one. It was the same in some competitions. As long as there weren't any restrictions on the use of body techniques or specific spells. In general, free competitions. No one would dare say anything if you pulled out a 400-meter-long broadsword, as long as you could control it. Su Xingyue was using her St. Common contact lens to scan everyone's combat strength. After getting the exact data, she stood up happily and directly shook hands with Lotus Sun, who was standing at the front of the line. "Classmate Lotus Sun, I've heard so much about you." Then, out of courtesy, she continued to shake hands with Lotus Sunday. This action was very natural and not deliberate, but it felt like Su Xingyue was deliberately testing something. "Hello, classmate Gu Xuanji." "Hello, classmate Qin." These short words directly pierced Super Chen's and Hero Gua's hearts. This voice was so sweet, it instantly made Super Chen's and Hirogwa's faces flush. Such a coy voice. Was it something people like them could listen to without paying? This was a sugar-coated bullet unique to Su Xingyue. Not only was Su Xingyue beautiful, she was also a godsend for the vocal control party. Although Lotus Sun's voice was also very pleasant, and Super Chen and Hirogwa had even thought that she had gone to voice acting training at the start of school. But once Su Xingyue came, Lotus Sun couldn't compare in the end. After all, they had heard Lotus Sun's voice for most of the semester, but Su Xingyue's sweetness was something new. No one would refuse the wonderful experience of something new. Su Xingyue sent out one sugar-coated bullet after another, and at the same time, observed everyone's reaction. When she shook Wang Zhen's hand, she suddenly sensed that his expression seemed a little nervous. It wasn't because he was shaking her hand, but because he was being watched by some kind of danger, as if he was going to lose his life in the next moment. Big beads of sweat rolled down his cheeks. Su Xingyue immediately smiled. "Classmate Wang Zhen, are you all right?" Wang Zhen didn't even dare look in Lu Qingyi's direction. He knew what he had to do, so he didn't wait for Su Xingyue to shake his hand. He just clenched his fist and bumped it with Su Xingyue's. It's everyone's responsibility to prevent and control the epidemic. Let's not shake hands. This was the first time Su Xingyue had suffered a setback, but she still tried her best to maintain a smile. She suddenly realized that the people from number 60 high seemed to be different from the people she had met before. Except for Super Chen and Hirogwa, who had expected normal reactions, everyone else was unexpectedly sloppy and ordinary when she interacted with them. Although number 60 high's ranking had risen very quickly in the last 6 months, it still hadn't reached the level of St. Ku's, right? Su Xingyue had thought that everyone from number 60 high would be like Super Chen and Hirogwa, but when she shook hands with them, she realized that the elites from number 60 high who had been picked out were actually all indifferent. It was as if he was used to seeing big scenes. Each and every one of them looked as if they had saved the universe. However, as a student of Sacred College, Su Xingyue still tried her best to maintain her composure. Even if she suffered a setback, she still used her professional expression management skills to control her smile. "Hello, classmate Wang Ling." The last one was Wang Ling. She had noticed him as soon as he entered the door. He was the first person from number 60 high to rise in the ranking list this time, and he had also been present in the previous several large-scale competitions. Although he looked weak and his usual results weren't particularly outstanding, it seemed that number 60 high had won every competition that Wang Ling had participated in. Su Xingyue was particularly concerned about this, and she took the initiative to shake hands with Wang Ling. At the same time, the invisible skin sensor on her palm also operated. This was St. Ku's second piece of black technology. The skin-type gloves were like a thin film on her hand, and no one would be able to tell at all that Su Xingyue was wearing this magic treasure. The skin-type gloves were used in conjunction with contact lenses, and could more accurately pinpoint a person's realm. This was why she had shaken hands with them one by one earlier. This batch of elite students from number 60 high were all at the late foundation establishment stage. To be honest, Su Xingyue was a little disappointed. The average strength of the elites was only at this level. The grade 1 students from St. Ku were all at the middle golden core stage and above. Some could even directly break through to the nascent soul stage in grade 3. At that moment, Su Xingyue was a little disappointed in her heart. But to be cautious, she still followed the plan she had formulated earlier and tested him. The moment she shook hands with Wang Ling, Su Xingyue suddenly felt that her palm was actually rapidly heating up. What was going on? Su Xingyue was utterly astonished by this sudden scene. After confirming that Wang Ling's realm was actually only at the middle foundation establishment stage, she hurriedly let go. At that moment, everyone's focus had also shifted. Even Super Chin and Hero Gua came back to their senses from Su Xingyue's gentle gesture. Because they realized that Su Xingyue's eyes were actually emitting smoke, the contact lenses and gloves were ruined at the same time. This was a situation that Su Xingyue had never imagined. But Su Xingyue was Su Xingyue in the end. As one of Saint Ku's trump cards, she could still advance and retreat with ease even in this situation, and remained calm. Sorry, I need to go to the restroom. She practically sprinted to the restroom, took off her glasses and gloves, and put them in her storage bag. Because these two things were really too useful, Su Xingyue used them especially frequently. In addition, she often went abroad for competitions, so she didn't have time to take care of them. Who would have thought that she would actually drop the ball at this critical moment? Fortunately, she had already tested out the people from number 60 high. Compared with Saint Ku, these elites from number 60 high were still a far cry. For this competition in the core world this time, Washo Nation's delegation could bring an extra team of 7 students, and as the number 1 high school, their Saint Ku was bound to go. The remaining team of 7 would then be selected from the top 30 high schools in the country. That was right, top 30. Number 60 high was currently ranked 37th in the country, and didn't even qualify to go. It was even reasonable to say that number 60 high and Saint Ku had nothing to do with each other. But for some reason, number 60 high's name had actually been included in the official recommendation list this time, so Su Xingyue had been ordered to come to number 60 high almost as soon as the competition was over. Furthermore, the person who had instructed her to come here was none other than Saint Ku's current headmaster, Dai Tianchen, also known as Maniac Dai. Chapter 1921. This time, it was a phalanx of selected cultivation high schools representing their countries that would be going to the core world to participate in the competition. Because of the advantage of the entrance, Washo Nation could bring an extra team of 7 people in. Thus, in theory, there was no so-called competitive relationship between St. College and number 60 high school, because in the core world, everyone's guns were pointed at outsiders. The most important thing should be how to work together in the core world and bring glory to the country. However, Su Xingyue's visit this time had been directed by Dai Tianchen, the current headmaster of St. Common. Given Maniac Dai's temper, Su Xingyue guessed that the current headmaster might be curious and wanted to sound number 60 high out. Another reason might be that he wanted to share the data he had collected with an allied high school. It was like the relationship between number 60 high and number 59 high. On the surface, they seemed to be competing with each other, but in fact, they also had an alliance to work together and make progress. The same was true for St. Common. St. Common might currently sit firmly on the throne of the number 1 high school, but to be able to sit in this position for so long, it was extremely vigilant in times of peace. Even a school as powerful as St. Common had allies. Thus, after receiving the data, Su Xingyue guessed that it was very likely that the data would be shared with the second-ranked high school in the country, Jingmen No. 8 High School. Of course, these were just Su Xingyue's speculations for now. She was actually a little vexed, since the contact lenses and gloves that St. Common had given her had been burnt, but she had already come to a conclusion about number 60 high, so after saying goodbye to Headmaster Chin and Vice Headmaster Golden Lamp Monk, she directly sent a WeChat message to Dai Tianchen. There were only 2 words, nothing to fear. Su Xingyue's visit this time was very sudden, and Headmaster Chin was certainly not completely unprepared. After seeing Su Xingyue off, he continued to lecture Wang Ling and the others in the office. After deliberating for a long time, he said, "Students, as you can see, they don't come with good intentions. After all, number 60 high was currently the number 1 high school, and the person it had sent was one of its trump cards. That kind of temperament was unforgettable. Even Lotus Sun's goddess Halo had dimmed considerably. If you had to say, Su Xingyue was more like a female immortal who would only appear in a painting of the secret land of mountains and rivers. But the truth was that most of the people here, except for Super Chin and Hirogwa, were exceptionally calm when facing Su Xingyue. After all, they were all people who had seen the world. To be honest, Wang Ling honestly thought that if Lotus Sun had been wearing that moon-colored glazed hanfu, she would have directly pressed Su Xingyue to the ground and rubbed her. But now in school, everyone was wearing the same uniform. Clothes make the man, and Wang Ling felt that there really wasn't much of a competition without a common set of conditions. At this moment, Headmaster Chin continued, perhaps everyone has already guessed that there will be a large-scale competition this time. Moreover, it was a competition that involved countries as a unit. They had to choose students from 2 schools and combine them to be sent as representatives. However, whether we can go or not is still unknown. According to what I know, Saint Ku sent Su Xingyue here to probe. It can't be that Saint Ku is testing us, right? Lotus Sun asked. Student Lotus Sun is really smart. Saint family was in first place, and their quota for the competition had already been decided. As for the second school, it will be recommended by the higher-ups, or even decided after a comprehensive evaluation. Speaking up to this point, Headmaster Chin was suddenly silent for a while before he said in a low voice, and we have a lot of opponents. Although the higher-ups have already selected a batch, and our number 60 high is one of them, the overall quality of the other high schools is better than ours. Saint Ku didn't send Su Xingyue here to probe us this time. It's clearly for their allied school. Headmaster Chin said unhurriedly. Although his realm wasn't as high as that of the other high school headmasters, he was probably the only one who could make the other headmasters shudder with fear with his current realm. Figuring out the opponent's intentions and arranging troops had always been one of Headmaster Chen's strong points. In addition, number 60 high was also an allied school, so Headmaster Chin had long since understood Saint Ku's intentions. Everyone in the office now, as well as some of the senior students who are in class and haven't come, are the elite representatives of our number 60 high. But there are only 7 spots this time, and the final list will need to be decided after a comprehensive evaluation. No matter who is chosen in the end, I hope that no one will hold any grudges in their hearts. Headmaster Chin said, we're a team. No matter who goes in the end, the glory belongs to everyone. Wang Ling hadn't thought that Headmaster Chin would actually leave them behind to lecture them on this matter. But whether or not they could go now was still unknown, and the key still depended on the final decision of the higher-ups. Their number 60 high had already miraculously passed the first round of screening, but as Headmaster Chin said, which high school this time wasn't more outstanding than them? In addition, Saint Ku had come to gather information for their ally, Jingmen number 8 high school, so Wang Ling was actually very reassured. He felt that the chances of number 60 high winning this time were very slim. Hence, Wang Ling had been quite apprehensive before coming. Now that he had heard Headmaster Chen's introduction, he instantly felt a lot more at ease. First, it was still questionable whether number 60 high would be chosen. Second, the final list this time would need to be decided through a comprehensive evaluation, and Headmaster Chen probably wouldn't be the one to make the decision. In other words, even if number 60 high was chosen in the end, Wang Ling felt that it might not be his turn to go. He had only done a little better in the monthly test this time, and his extraordinary performance had been short-lived. Number 60 high was now full of experts, and 9 people had already been called to the office. Not counting the elite students in the senior grades, there were at least 30 people in number 60 high who met the current criteria. Wang Ling felt that the probability of hitting the jackpot in a row was too low. No matter what, it wouldn't be him. After school in the afternoon, Wang Ling was packing up his textbooks and planning to go straight home, but at that moment, he saw someone hand him a crispy noodle snack packet. It was Lotus Sun who had handed him the packet, but it wasn't her who had given it to him. Wang Ling, old Pan asked me to give this to you. She said it's your reward this time. Wang Ling was startled. This was the first time he had received such a direct reward from Teacher Pan. What was even more horrifying was that the packet old Pan had given him was actually a new flavor from this month, a golden plastic bag. A limited edition snack shop. He suppressed the pleasant surprise in his eyes and didn't pretend anymore as he directly tore open the crispy noodle snack packet in front of Lotus Sunday. There was no one else in the classroom, so Lotus Sun boldly stared at Wang Ling's face, which was slightly flushed with excitement. Although it was still expressionless, she felt that Wang Ling was very funny like this. "Hey, it looks like there's a card." "It's a golden card," Lotus Sun suddenly said. Wang Ling took out the card. He remembered that the new crispy noodle snack had already removed the card collection function for the sake of the environment. Instead, one would scan the QR code in the bag and draw cards online. After collecting the corresponding card set, one could exchange it for something in real life. Cash rewards, virtual props, and even cultivation resources. Wang Ling was bewildered. Why was there a card in this new package? Could it be a bug? He took the card out, tore open the plastic cover, and examined it carefully. Wang Ling was stunned to discover something. This wasn't an ordinary crispy noodle snack card. Instead, it was an invitation from Songhai Vermilion Bird Gate 9 Heavens Tea House. Chapter 1922. The number 1 combat training ground of the Academy was an exclusive combat ground for the top 15 elites of each grade. Rivers, lakes, forests, deserts, glaciers. Almost every terrain that could be seen in the real world was covered in this place. The exterior of the stadium was exceptionally grand. From a distance, it was no bigger than a football field. In fact, it was combined with the existing mature space expansion technology of the cultivation world, directly expanding the area of the internal battlefield to as much as 30,000 acres. Furthermore, there were special light sensors set up in all directions, which were used to calculate all kinds of values during the battle. From the big ones to the small frictions during the physical battle, everything was recorded accurately. This kind of combat training configuration was more luxurious than that of many universities in the cultivation world. As the number 1 cultivation university in the country, St. College had truly achieved the integration of science and cultivation through existing scientific and technological means, and had further expanded its influence among high school cultivation universities in the country and even in the world. After collecting data on number 60 high school, Su Xingyue arrived at the training center that evening. The climate simulation system in the training center completely separated the world inside from the outside world. The current climate simulation system was in clear sky mode, and the simulated sunlight shining down from the ceiling was a little dazzling to Su Xingyue's eyes. "Let's go together." As soon as she entered the arena, she saw a young man dressed in the same ancient attire, who spoke calmly at the mouth of a towering waterfall in the arena. He wore a long black tunic with a few silver strands in his long black hair tied up in a bun. His eyes were slightly narrowed, and his heroic spirit mixed with an evil charm gave off a dangerous air that hid a dagger behind his smile. As the waterfall flowed under his feet, Chu Shuling stood as steady as a rock. His figure was thin and tall, like a commoner immortal from beyond the heavens, and he had an indescribable air about him. As soon as he said that, the people lying in wait around him all attacked in an instant. In the blink of an eye, hidden weapons abruptly arrived. Some of them even held air guns and condensed spirit chi into bullets which directly aimed at Chu Shuling's vital parts. In the blink of an eye, Chu Shuling was surrounded by a dense barrage of attacks. He was surrounded by all kinds of light spells, hidden weapons, and even bullets. However, when these flying objects were 8 feet away from him, they couldn't help but stop as they were directly frozen in the air. Chu Shuling's expression was calm and collected. As a trump card that was proficient in all elements, even when he was surrounded, he still maintained his calm and collected demeanor. In the next breath, he opened his eyes. There was a sharp glint in his handsome eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, all the flying creatures around him turned to look at him. Whying! All of them returned according to their original trajectories. Su Xingyuan knew that this was the move that Chu Shuling was most proficient in. Because he was a trump card that was proficient in all elements, he knew how to use natural elements to create a magnetic field and form an invisible shield for himself. Su Xingyu knew that the duel was over as she heard the screams from all around her. Chu Shuling won once again with her trump card. Is everyone hurt? After the battle ended, Chu Shuling put down his pride and waved his hand to summon a medical floating ball to scan everyone. He had held back just now and didn't go all out. The students who had been sparring with Chu Shuling all had grateful expressions on their faces. President Chu is still the best. We can only watch in the dust. They actually weren't weak. The students who could train in training ground number 1 were all geniuses who were ranked in the top 15 in their respective grades, and were pillars of youth in the country. In the end, they had been completely crushed in their duel with Chu Shuling, and hadn't even had the strength to breathe. This showed how terrifying Chu Shuling's strength was. Same as before, whoever has more than 1,000 battle points in the duel with President Chu just now can use this to claim a heavenly spirit pill from me later. Su Xingyue smiled. Chu Shuling smiled and chatted with everyone for a while, then very naturally walked together with Su Xingyue, as if they were taking a stroll and chatting. A handsome man and a beautiful woman were very pleasing to the eye. But apart from the people in the training hall, outsiders wouldn't be able to witness this scene. You're back. How's the situation? Chu Shuling asked as he took the bottle of mineral water from Su Xingyue. There's nothing to fear. Su Xingyue commented, those students from number 60 high are only at the foundation establishment stage. I think Jing Ba's team should be more than enough to deal with them. Chu Shuling smiled and shook his head. If this was a proper duel, I think Jing Ba's chances of winning are indeed very high. I'm just afraid that the higher-ups won't just use a competition to review the recommendation for the second high school team this time. A simple competition would be too simple and crude. Then what do you mean? Su Xingyue blinked with an incredulous expression on her face. In this operation, we're fighting on behalf of our country to win glory for our country. 2 different high schools, when they arrive at the scene, must aim their guns at the outside world and compete in unity. Chu Shuling said, what do you think number 60 high relied on to get this far this year? Could it be that he only relied on the strength of Miss Sun alone? Their team index and collective sense of honor index are very high, on par with our St. College. So that's how it is. That's why they were included in the recommendation list as an exception. I was wondering why they weren't even in the top 30. So how could they be included in the recommendation list this time? Su Xingyue looked enlightened. At that moment, she saw Chu Shuling suddenly stop in her tracks and frown deeply at the bottle cap she had just unscrewed. Won a prize. Another bottle. No way, mineral water is also doing this now. Su Xingyue was stupefied. No, another bottle. Chu Shuling handed the bottle cap to Su Xingyue. Su Xingyue carefully looked at the small words inside and read unhurriedly, 9 Heavens Tea House, invitation letter. After muttering to herself for a while, Su Xingyue seemed to think of something. I think I've heard of this tea house somewhere. The tea house in the old alley of Vermilion Bird Gate, Chu Shuling replied. Yes. Su Xingyue said, I remember it's a very famous tea house that went viral. Then you probably don't know who the owner of that tea house is. Is it a senior? It's a senior, and an almighty. Chu Shuling frowned. But I don't know why this senior is calling me over. Su Xingyue, then, are you going or not? Chu Shuling nodded slightly. Since it's a senior's invitation, of course I have to go. Also, I'm afraid that Jingba's people have also received the same invitation. Help me tell them that if they want to go to the center of the earth to win glory for the country, they must take this invitation seriously and can't be careless. Okay. Su Xingyue agreed. Chapter 1923. Despite Su Xingyue's otherworldly appearance, she was, in fact, a famous socialite in St. Cork. Almost every school had a person like her, who played the role of liaising with other schools to expand their relationships and improve friendships. Of course, it wasn't free for Su Xingyue to pass on the information. As the number 8 high school in Beijing, which was ranked second in the country, the student union had actually spent a lot of money in order to obtain information about sacred sciences. Fortunately, these prices were agreed upon in advance and paid in one go, so there was no need to worry about the subsequent bleeding. However, as the student council president of Jingmen No. 8 High School, Li Changjia still had a headache. Heaven essence grass, absolute earth flower, 8-foot jade, 9 desolate lotus seed. These were all rare treasures of heaven and earth that could be found on the market. He had spent a long time to gather all of them for Su Xingyue. It could be said that he had truly shed a lot of blood. But he really didn't have any other choice. After all, No. 8 Jingmen High School was in Jinghua City, and wasn't in the same city as No. 60 High School. If he wanted information on No. 60 High School, it would be most convenient for St. Ke to do it. While receiving Su Xingyue's latest message, Li Changjia, the student union president of Jingmen No. 8 High School, was staring at the crab shell in his hand, lost in thought. Although he did not know why there were words carved in the crab shell. But the facts told him that there was. Li Changjia had no idea how it was done. After such a fresh crab was cooked, he opened it and saw that the inside of the shell was actually engraved with the words of the Jotian Tea House's invitation. Did they take advantage of the crab's inattentiveness to peel off the shell, carve it, and then reinstall it? Li Changjia felt that it was ridiculous. Moreover, it was obvious that the other party had come prepared, because there were not many people who knew that he liked to eat crabs. What do you think? Do you want to go? A girl with long dark blue hair asked in the student council office. You have to go. Moreover, Su Xingyue had just sent me a message, telling me to take this seriously. Looks like this senior Ting from Jotian Tea House is indeed not an ordinary person. From what you said, it seems like you know something about it. I went to Songhai City for a networking event with other schools before. He had also heard some rumors about the owner of the tea house, Senior Ting. Some people say that even if any of the 10 generals were to visit this tea house, they would have to be respectful to the owner of this tea house. Oh my God, who is this person? The girl with dark blue hair was stunned. I'm not sure yet. But there was nothing wrong with taking it seriously. Moreover, this senior definitely didn't just invite me. I'm afraid that he has also used his own methods to invite the other people on the recommendation list. Therefore, going to take a look will also help us understand the situation. Li Changjia furrowed his brows and put on a serious expression. Then, he stood up and said, how about this, I'll go over right now. Pack some crabs and eat them on the way. At the same time, on the other side, Wang Ling was lost in thought as he stared at this golden invitation card. Stunned for a moment, he stood up and threw the card into the trash can. Lotus Sun face-bombed. She knew it would be like this. Different people had completely different attitudes towards cards. Faced with a stranger's invitation, Lotus Sun felt that this was the right response. Jotian Tea House. They didn't know what kind of place this was. What if there was danger? What if they went to a tea house and the manager of the tea house brewed sleeping black tea for them? These were all issues that needed to be considered. Lotus Sun felt that young people should have the ability to think independently and distinguish danger. As expected of classmate Wang Ling. In fact, before giving the crispy noodle snacks to Wang Ling, Lotus Sun had also received an invitation from Jotian Tea House. Furthermore, the invitation had been given in a very outrageous manner. She didn't know how the other party had done it, but the other party had actually directly carved words on the milk candy Wang Ling had given her. That was to say, the person who had given the invitation had to be someone close to her. There was most likely a mole in the villa she lived in. Wang Ling had given her a full sack of these milk candies last time, and she had stored most of them in the bank's fresh-keeping vault. She usually only kept 3 on her as a backup in case of danger. To be able to steal her milk candy so precisely, carve words on it without anyone noticing, and finally return it to her. Furthermore, he had also calculated when she wanted to eat the candy, and predicted that she would open the one with the words carved on it. Only someone close to her could have done all of this. Furthermore, Lotus Sun felt that she had definitely received some kind of psychological suggestion, otherwise she wouldn't have suddenly thought of eating the milk candy. This was a precious milk candy that Wang Ling had given her. After seeing the words carved on the milk candy before, she had actually been hesitating about what to do. Now she knew. Who cared about Jotian Tea House? She would eat the milk candy first. At Songhai City's Vermilion Bird Gate Jotian Tea House, Ting Luken was fishing by the pond in the tea house's backyard. Jing Hicho had come looking for him again. This was his first time in the backyard, and he was stunned to find that the pond in the backyard was connected to the 5 lakes and 4 seas. Holding a bamboo fishing rod, Ting Luken looked very much like Jiang Taigong fishing. It was just that this pond was connected to the 5 lakes and 4 seas, so it wouldn't be too strange to catch anything. How did they react after receiving the invitation? Ting Luken seemed to have already known why Jing Hicho had come this time, and got straight to the point. Elder Ting, you have incredible foresight. Same college, Jingba, those higher-ranked schools are paying special attention. Li Changzhe from Jingba is already on the way, and will arrive today. He's quite proactive. Chu Shuling from St. College just probed the streets, and didn't directly come in. AI, as expected of the number 1 high school. This cautious style is worth learning. Ting Luken nodded, especially satisfied with Chu Shuling. Could it be that they already know Elder Ting's identity, which is why, there's no way they know who I am. But given their experience, it wouldn't be strange for them to guess something. Ting Luken shook his head slightly and smiled. That's right, what about the other high schools? I want to know how they've reacted. The other high schools have already sent people to find out the location of Jotian Tea House. Only. Saying this, Jing Hicho paused, his expression a little unsightly. Ting Luken asked, only what? Make it clear. Jing Hicho hesitated for a bit, but still took out a crumpled golden invitation card from his sleeve. I found this in number 60 High's trash. Elder Ting, they've gone too far. In my opinion, number 60 High's quota should be directly revoked. They weren't in the top 30 in the first place, and making an exception for them is already a great blessing. Is that what you think? Ting Luken immediately laughed and looked at Jing Hicho with a "you're too young" expression. This old man thinks that this kid from number 60 High has the most personality. Then now, this Wang. I suddenly can't remember his name. In any case, this classmate Wang, you should personally pay him a visit. Invite him over, said Ting Luken. Chapter 1924. Jing Hicho didn't understand what was going on at all. He was just a foundation establishment student, so why did Elder Ting care so much about him? Number 60 High School had been selected as an exception to begin with. If Elder Ting hadn't put number 60 High School on the list back then, it was likely that number 60 High School wouldn't have even qualified for further selection. The qualification to go to the core world this time was very hard to come by, and it was a move to win glory for the country. On the list of the second 7-man team, the top 30 high schools were secretly surging. Everyone wanted to ask for permission to fight. In fact, the invitation from the Nine Heavens Tea House was also a disguised test of the intelligence-gathering ability of these universities. If this group of people knew who Elder Ting was, they would definitely not refuse the invitation. To put it bluntly, so many colleges and universities had placed great importance on this, but in the end, this person had made an exception and lost his invitation letter. If it was lost, then so be it. Ting Lu Ken actually wanted him to personally go and get it. Jing Hicho could not hold it in any longer. He was the dean of the Nine Heavens Essence-Seeking Yard. His position was comparable to that of the deputy leader of the 100 Schools Alliance, and was even more powerful than the headmasters of cultivation high schools. When all was said and done, he was also one of Ajua's immediate superiors. In the end, he was sent to invite a foundation establishment student. What was more, it wasn't like he was completely unaware of this mascot from number 60 high school with the surname Wang. He was just a person who had relied on luck to get to the champion position in a few competitions. Why was Elder Ting so concerned about him? Logically speaking, Jing Hichio's heart was crumbling a little. If it wasn't for Ting Luchen's unyielding attitude and his insistence that he personally invite Wang Ling, he would have been extremely unwilling. But now, he really had no other choice. After all, Elder Ting had concealed his identity in the Vermilion Bird sect for many years and had already found many students. Jing Hicho could only think that perhaps his eyes were not good enough to see the mascot's excellence. He didn't know if it was because they had to make time to prepare for the competition, or if it was because Teacher Pan was in a particularly good mood, but Grade 1, Class 3's homework today was pitifully small, and Wang Ling finished it all at school. Now that he was home, he started to feel empty, which he hadn't felt in a long time. Was this what it felt like to not do homework for a day? Sure enough, he was still a child who loved to learn. With nothing to do, Wang Ling naturally could only scroll through his phone, Weibo, TikTok, and various other public platforms to kill time. At first glance, Wang Ling saw the trending news that the system had recommended. Rock singer Mr. Wang Banbai is about to hold a concert. At that moment, his heart skipped a beat. He immediately knew that something had happened to the entertainment industry again. He didn't know if it was because the entrance to the core of the earth had been opened, but Wang Ling realized that buildings seemed to be collapsing everywhere in the entertainment industry this year, and every now and then there would be a major earthquake. Wang Ling felt that this was a kind of backlash from the entertainment industry. In the end, it was because people had been too lenient with their standards for celebrities and idols in the past. Now that Huaxiao Nation was gradually growing stronger and the country was prosperous and its people were at peace, the people were beginning to have rich thinking skills. At the very least, she would no longer be immersed in the world of an idol alone. She would no longer associate herself with a celebrity idol. Therefore, the standards for these artists and idols were raised. In addition, these celebrity idols nowadays especially like to create public personas for themselves. In the past, there were scholars, and now there were immortals and so on. The more extreme a public persona was, the more complete the collapse would be. Thus, it was better not to randomly create public personas, because if one wasn't careful, things would often go awry. Wang Ling felt that he could be used as a model case study today. If he had always insisted on keeping his scores low, there wouldn't have been so many problems this time. But he had fallen for Wang Ying's nonsense before the monthly test this time, but Wang Ling himself couldn't figure it out. He had only scored a little higher than usual, so how had he risen to first place in the whole grade? This was too outrageous. While he was feeling gloomy, Audjua suddenly sent him a text message about the plan for the core of the earth. Because Audjua had no right to make decisions on this matter, if Wang Ling hadn't asked him to help investigate, Audjua probably wouldn't have known about this plan at all. Thus, the core of the earth competition this time had been kept a secret. The higher-ups hadn't planned to announce it to the public at this stage, so there wasn't any news about it online at the moment. Shifu, I've asked around a lot, and finally found out what's going on. This time, the core of the Earth is actually a competition for the division of resources between various countries. But considering that if the various countries send their almighties to fight it out, it might be a devastating blow to the core of the Earth. So after a joint discussion, we came up with a plan to select elite high school students as representatives and send them to the core of the Earth for the competition. The final winner of the competition will have the right to divide resources into a limited area, as well as 10% more land than the other cultivation countries. After reading Audiobook's message, Wang Ling nodded thoughtfully. So this was the plan, indeed, although true immortals weren't much in Wang Ling's eyes. If these true immortals really fought, they could destroy several large cities. The resources in the core of the Earth were precious to begin with. If these almighties really went to the core of the Earth to fight it out, in the end, there might not be any resources left. So it was indeed safest to send high school students whose average realm was between the Foundation Establishment and Golden Core stages. They were just high school students, after all, they weren't that destructive. At this thought, Wang Ling felt even more ashamed in his heart. Then all the more he couldn't send him. What if he directly detonated a nuclear bomb in the core of the Earth? The reason why the Almighties weren't allowed to compete was to protect the core of the Earth. In the end, if Audiobook was sent there, it would be no different from installing a nuclear bomb directly at home. Now that he knew the whole story, Wang Ling's heart was on the verge of collapse. He had a bad feeling about this. Although the probability of him being selected as a member of the 7-member team was very low, he still felt like he was being watched. Just then, Wang Ling, who was sitting at his desk, suddenly looked out the window. It wasn't just Wang Ling, even Loopy Toad sensed a powerful aura suddenly appear at the entrance of the Wang family's small villa. Peak level 8 True Immortal. Loopy Toad shook its fur and looked out the window calmly as it immediately made an accurate judgment on the realm of the newcomer. Earth had already upgraded, which meant that the overall realm of human cultivators would take a big leap forward in the future and be on par with that of the domain of the gods. But at the end of the day, there were still very few human cultivators who could reach peak level 8 True Immortal. So who was this man, and why had he suddenly appeared at their doorstep? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.